Wednesday nights were usually a bit chaotic, particularly the third one each month because of my chess club meeting, which kicked off at 7 and lasted indefinitely. John and I didn't get home until 5, respectively. Dinner wasn't a concern, as we had food at the meeting, but there was always some last-minute task Emily, my wife of 5 years, needed done before I could head out. According to Emily, most of the chaos was my fault. She was 4 months pregnant, and her hormones were all over the place. Even though she was expecting, she was still the same angel I had fallen in love with. Now that she had that glowing, expectant mother look, it made leaving her for even a single evening twice as difficult. She was just right 5'5" tall, a well-proportioned 115 pounds body, with dark brown hair and mesmerizing green eyes. Her shape fit me perfectly. I loved her for more than her looks. She was witty, smart, and very observant. But her looks sure didn't hurt. Anyway, I had to leave by 7:23 to get to the meeting on time. So I had to run through the shower, dress, kiss my wife, and get back in the car to head out. I usually wasn't home until after 15, and often it was after 1. Tonight's meeting didn't look any different. After the shower, I threw on some khakis and a polo shirt, grabbed my briefcase, and headed through the kitchen to the garage. I kissed her on the back of the neck and gave her a squeeze to keep her from stumbling. She always wobbled when I kissed her on the neck like that, so I had to steady her. Then out the door into the garage with a quick glance back at Emily. It was tempting to skip the meeting, not only for Emily but because I had a project in the works in the garage. I was just finishing the installation of a baby monitor for what was going to be the nursery, and I figured maybe 33 minutes, and it would be ready to show off to my wife. She was always so appreciative of my small accomplishments, and I felt no shame in soaking up her compliments, however misplaced. I was a guy, after all, and didn't mind having my woman boost my ego. Climbing in the car, I activated the garage door opener and started the car. While the engine started humming, I set my briefcase on the seat next to me and checked that I had everything I needed. Cell phone, calculator, notebook, all were there. Then I backed out of the garage and down the driveway to the street, waving to Emily at the kitchen window where she was doing the dishes. She waved back as I reached the street. Before I could put the car in gear or even close the garage door with the remote, the cell phone rang, and I stopped everything to answer it. As I said hello, I looked up to wave to Emily one more time, but she had already disappeared from the window. "David," came the voice over the phone. "Glad I caught you. The meeting tonight is off. Our good President Kevin, along with both Ryan and Steve, have been called out of town, so with the president, treasurer, and secretary all gone, we thought it best to call it off this month. Nothing scheduled for tonight, unless you have something that can't wait." Needless to say, I was glad to take the night off. I just pulled right back into the garage, noting idly that Emily's face hadn't reappeared in the kitchen window of our 4-bedroom house. Yes, she had missed that I hadn't left, so I could surprise her later on. If she had been any place but the kitchen, she wouldn't have heard me drive back into the garage. Once in the garage, I lowered the garage door finally, and then sat in the car just relaxing for a few minutes. I decided I'd just order pizza tonight and not bother Emily to make my dinner or take the time to make it myself. I'd just take the time to get that monitor finished. Everything concerning the camera and the baby's room tube was done, except for some connections in the garage and final testing. The cosmetics in the nursery were pretty minor. The camera was mounted in a corner and was so small Emily hadn't yet noticed it and had been mounted for 10 days now. I'd get those done another time. Emily had casually mentioned how much a monitor in the nursery would save her steps checking on the baby when it was napping, hence my wiring the house. I decided to set up sound monitors in each of the rooms in the house while I was at it. The visual monitor in the baby's room had been an inspiration when I'd seen some gear a friend was discarding. The master controls were in our bedroom, but since I spent a fair amount of time in my garage workshop, I had a second master in a corner of the garage, complete with speakers and an old TV serving as the video monitor. It was flexible enough that the nursery could be monitored from any place in the house. As I mentioned, the whole thing was about complete with just a little fine-tuning needed before I could show Emily, surprise her, and get my points. So I decided to see if I could get the work done before I came in and collapsed in front of the TV for the night, or maybe collapsed on Emily for the night. That sounded even nicer. So I slipped out of my car and began checking my work. It took me maybe 23 minutes before everything seemed to be warm and working properly. So I started checking out the sound feeds. Each of them could be turned on and off separately, or I could feed them all into the 5 second-hand speakers I had lined up above my little corner. I quickly checked each one separately, starting with the living room. They all worked perfectly, actually pretty sensitive because I could hear Emily taking a shower in the bath off the master bedroom. I set them up so they were all live and feeding into the garage. Then I began the last connections for the video monitor. I got kind of lost in my wiring checks when I heard someone in the living room speaker. It sounded like Emily was on the telephone. I turned the sound up a bit to see how it worked, and it was perfect, beautifully clear. The 31 ID spent on the 5 speakers had been a real bargain. "Alex, it's Emily. If you can be here by 8, it's on, darling," came my wife's voice over the speaker. "Okay, love, I'll see you then. Don't you dare be late, we won't have nearly enough time as it is. And no, don't expect a repeat." There was a little pause, then Emily giggled and hung up the phone. What the hell was that about? Who is Alex? Well, the only Alex I knew is Alex Carter. His wife, Rachel, and Emily had been roommates in college. Rachel was still Emily's best friend, and Alex and I hit it off pretty well too. He was a big guy and a lot of fun. I guess he and Emily had a few dates before Rachel, and he hooked up. We spent a lot of evenings together and enjoyed many a barbecue. The two girls were pretty close. Emily told me they'd done some real crazy girl things together at college. She had calmed me down when she gave me a kiss and told me they hadn't done anything I should be worried about. I kind of shrugged my shoulders, figuring Emily and Alex were planning something for Rachel. I'd find out at 8 anyway, which was only 23 minutes away. Giving up the speculation, I flipped the on button for the camera in the baby's room and sat back with a smile on my face. The monitor showed the room clearly. Actually, we still had it set up as a guest bedroom, and the monitor was focused directly on the big king-sized bed. I was surprised to see the bed was made and the sheets turned down. It was the first time I'd seen Emily make it up when we weren't expecting guests. Checking the video controls, I zoomed the camera in and out. At the widest zoom, I could see everything in the bedroom except into the corner where the camera was fixed near the ceiling. I left it there at that setting and critically examined the picture. The door, window, and closet were visible, and the bed, of course, was centered in the shot, and all were clear as a bell. Leaving the controls as they were, I started cleaning up my workbench, feeling pretty good about myself and the sound and picture system I'd made. I pulled a soda out of the old refrigerator and leaned back in my '69 recliner. We'd picked it up at a yard sale, and my wife wouldn't let it in the house, but it fit me in the garage perfectly. Well, I'll admit it fit the garage perfectly anyway. I was just about finished with the soda and thinking of ordering out for some pizza and going in to surprise Emily when I heard the front doorbell. A second later, I heard the door open and heard Emily greeting the visitor. "Hey, I've had a hard time waiting. Come on in, Alex. We have until 14, and then it's over, but until then, I'm yours all the way." I was stunned, not by the words but by the way my wife's voice sounded. The only time I'd heard that sultry tone in her voice was in our bedroom, or when we were on our way to the bedroom. It was her come-get-me voice. I choked on the last mouthful of soda and sat bolt upright. On the speaker, I heard the front door shut, then Emily's voice again. "Damn, Alex, from the look and feel of this bulge in your pants, I'm not the only one who had a hard time waiting. Looks really good. Come here, honey, give me a real hello." I heard Alex reply. Then there were several minutes when it was almost silent. All I could hear were a few grunts and moans. "Then not here, Alex. Come on back to our room. I've got it all set up for us," from Emily. I thought I was going to be sick to my stomach. It sounded like Emily was taking him back to our bedroom. Jesus, what was going on? I didn't know what to do. My first impulse was to burst through the door into the kitchen and throw Alex out of the house. Still, what was actually going on? I took a deep breath. It couldn't be what it sounded like. Emily and I were in love. I was sure she had been as faithful to me as I had been to her. She teased me about looking at pretty women, but I knew she was sure it was only looking. I'd really never had an impulse to stray. We were compatible lovers. She always had all she wanted when we made love. She was used to multiple highs, and I never finished loving her until I was convinced she really didn't need or want any more. This had to be a misunderstanding on my part. It had to be. She was my best friend. She was going to have my baby. I was just sitting there in the worn old lounger when my eye caught movement on the monitor in the baby's room. The door opened, and Emily gently pushed Alex into the room with the made-up bed. She pushed him around to the other side of the bed, between the bed and the window. Then she swayed back around to stand on the other side in front of the closed closet doors. She was looking across the bed at Alex and almost right into the camera. Emily was dressed in her worn-out, ragged old Saturday morning robe, which reached just mid-thigh. Her hair, however, was pulled up into a sophisticated bun at the top of her head, emphasizing the slender column of her throat. She had applied makeup just the right amount. She looked like a princess receiving her prince, except for the ragged old worn-out robe. On her feet, she was wearing the pair of high-heeled slippers I had bought her for her birthday 3 months ago. She had worn them that evening, and I had told her how they emphasized her magnificent legs, but I didn't remember them being out of her closet since then. No sooner had that thought come to me than I knew. No, I hadn't seen them out of her closet since then. I felt like I was about to cry. This couldn't be happening. My wife stood tall and proud across the bed from one of my best friends, looking directly into his eyes. Her hand slowly came up to the throat of the robe. With her left hand holding the robe closed at the neckline, she used her right hand to unsnap each button, slowly working her way down. When each fastener came loose, the robe would billow out around it, teasing Alex with glimpses inside her robe. Once she had undone all the buttons while continuing to hold the robe closed, she brought her right hand back to her throat and, using both hands, she slowly peeled the robe open. Once open, she stood for a moment, letting us admire the vision framed by the robe. Then she let her hands drop, shrugging her shoulders to let the robe drop and puddle around her feet. She was wearing the lingerie I gifted her on Valentine's Day. She had modeled the set for me on Valentine's Day. I had not seen it since. Still looking into Alex's eyes, she held up a hand and crooked a finger at him, beckoning him to come to her. When he turned to come around the bed, I saw my former friend's stunned face. He choked out, "Emily, I was expecting to be with you tonight, but you have made this really special for me. God, you are beautiful." They both got undressed. I suddenly snapped out of my daze. No matter how this worked out, I was going to need proof of what was happening. Thinking for a minute, I hurried into the now-deserted living room, making as little noise as possible and working quickly. I got a fresh SD card, took it back to the garage, hooked it up to the monitor, and turned everything back on. The monitor came alive, showing Alex and my wife. I almost cried. Through the tears, I saw them move to the bed, holding each other tightly. They started going at it. It seemed to go on forever. Alex was relentless. After maybe 18 minutes of this, Emily tried to pull out from under Alex. I stared at the sickening scene on the monitor for a few more minutes and then got up and began pacing. I knew if I walked into that house, it would not end well. I was sick to my stomach and totally unable to think of what I should do next. "Alex, unless you want David to walk in on us, you have to go now," and she bent, picked up his clothes, and handed them to him as she gathered the remains of the lingerie she had gifted to him along with herself, placing it on the dresser. I watched as Emily threw on her old robe and stripped the sheets off the bed, not even waiting for Alex to finish dressing before she had bundled them up and taken them to the washer in the laundry room between the kitchen and garage. When she walked back into the living room, Alex was there and, with the boastful voice men often use, he greeted her. "Hey, beautiful lady, that was great. We really have to talk about doing it again." "No, Alex," she answered. "I meant it when I said just the once, and only because of our deal, and I guess for old time's sake too." Alex replied, "Sure, honey, I understand, but sometime you may get to thinking of us. Sometime in the future, this was just for once, I agree, but if you start thinking about how great it was, maybe we can try it again." I heard the sounds of another sloppy kiss before his footsteps seemed to fade as he went to the door. I could hear the impatience in my wife's voice and the little sounds she was making, but it didn't register at the time, nor did the exhalation she made when she finally followed him to the door. Literally sick to my stomach, I lay back in the worn recliner, looking at the now empty bedroom showing on the monitor. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was 14:08. They had stayed to their time schedule very well. I heard Alex murmur something at the door and clearly heard Emily reply, "No, Alex, This was just the one time, and only because of our agreements so many years ago. David is my husband, my love, and the man I want in my life. I'm not sure why we did it now myself. Besides, Rachel may be okay with this, but she's my best friend. She's more important to me than an affair. Isn't she more important to you? I couldn't understand Alex mumble, but I heard another kiss and then heard the door shut quietly. Almost immediately, I heard the lock click home. If I hadn't been so filled with tears and despair, I think the exhaustion sounding in Alex's voice after his session with my wife would have been funny. At the moment, it certainly didn't seem funny at all. After the door shut, Emily reappeared in the guest bedroom. I couldn't seem to think of it as the baby's room anymore. She quickly went over the room, carefully making sure nothing was out of place after the tryst. Gathering up her clothes, she disappeared into the hall, and I soon heard her in our bedroom. I listened to her shower, and then she was out, and I heard the bed rustle. It sounded like my wife had gone to bed. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was almost 14:33. I just sat and stared into space. I had no idea where my life and my wife were going from here. I only knew I was heartsick. Thoughts and ideas crowded through my head. In some I thought of things that would excuse my wife for what she had done. In others, I answered the excuses, and in yet others, I asked myself what I had done to cause Emily to need another man. Sometime after 1 a.m., I wearily arose and turned the electronics off. Entering the house through the garage door, I headed directly to the master bedroom, passing the guest room where my wife had betrayed me with Alex. I glanced in. The room was just as I had last seen it. Monday evening, the bed was stripped, and nothing seemed out of place. There was nothing to tell that anything had taken place. Groaning to myself, I entered my bedroom. Glancing at my sleeping wife, I went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, and did my business. Stripping off my clothes and leaving them in the dirty clothes hamper before dropping them in, I glanced in, and the hamper was empty. No soiled lingerie there. When I climbed into bed, my wife rolled over and, throwing an arm over me, she sleepily asked how my night had been. After a moment's silence, I told her it had been very upsetting, but I would tell her about it later. Usually, she snuggled up to me. Tonight, however, she just lay quietly, pulling her arm back and rolling over with her back to me. She seemed to fall back asleep immediately, though listening to her breathing, I thought she was still awake. I just rolled away from her, then stared into the darkness. I don't know how much I slept that night. I couldn't remember actually sleeping at all. When the alarm went off, I just lay there. I was certainly in no shape to go to work. Telling Emily I think I had the flu, I stayed in bed until I heard her car leave for work. I got up and began carefully opening drawers, being sure not to displace anything as I searched Emily's dresser. In the bottom drawer, folded and stored in a paper bag under some sweaters, was the lingerie Alex had enjoyed. I pulled it out, noting the crotch of the ruined panties was still damp. After calling my boss and begging off work for the day, I watched the tape ID made the night before. When I began, I just skipped through it, not wanting to relive the experience again, just wanting to be certain the tape was good. But after a bit, I began noticing things I had missed the night before. I spent the rest of the morning studying the video and what it held. I made 2 copies and made 2 calls. Going home, I realized I hadn't eaten since lunch the day before. ID missed last night's dinner, and the thought of breakfast this morning had turned my stomach. I didn't have the flu, but my stomach was still very upset. Emily got home at her usual time, about 5. When she came in to give me a kiss, I turned my head, and she kissed my cheek, giving me a strange look. Finally, about 6, I decided there was no real reason to put this off any longer. I was only getting myself more upset. Emily, I'd like to show you what I've been doing for the baby monitor we were talking about. Do you have a few minutes? I asked. David, can you wait until after dinner? I'm just about to put it on, was her answer. Picking up my cell phone, I asked her what she wanted to eat tonight. She smiled at me and suggested Italian, so I ordered it delivered. Then I took her into the bedroom and showed her again how the controls worked on the console in the corner behind the door. I turned on the sound and left her there while I went from room to room, talking to her over the monitor from each room. Of course, she couldn't answer me, but when I got back to the bedroom, the smile on her face told me she understood it was working better than we had planned. Turning on the video portion, I told her to wait and watch a moment. Leaving her in the bedroom, I stepped into the guest room and stood where she had stood last night. Their eyes locked and mimed a slow bump and grind before I returned to our bedroom. She enthused, "David, that's perfect. When did you get this going?" "This afternoon," I answered. She had a puzzled little smile, and I could see she was trying to figure out when ID had a chance to do it, like last night. "One more thing to show you, Emily." I took her hand and led her to the garage. "I spend a lot of time here and thought it a good idea to have a monitoring station here to cover the baby when you have to go out." Then I turned the system on in the garage. "One thing I added last night. Let me show you how it works," and I slipped the USB drive into the TV. "Watch the bedroom and see what happens," I told her. Watching the monitor, of course, we saw the same view as from our bedroom. The view I had first seen last night of an empty room, though now the bed was unmade. Then I used the remote to turn on the TV, and the picture immediately changed to show Emily on her knees before Alex. Glancing at her face, I saw the color had drained from it, and she seemed to sway before catching her balance. She looked suddenly at me, and I just looked in her eyes and pushed fast forward, stopping in just a couple of seconds. Then I gestured for her to watch the screen again. When she looked back, she saw Alex grabbing at her lingerie. There was no sound, but we could see Emily say something to him. We both watched and then heard the small gasp she gave, which I now realized was discomfort. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw tears running down Emily's face and also saw the little cringe when she saw again the rough way Alex had treated her. Stopping the video, I asked if she wanted to see any more. My wife just looked helplessly at me. "Come in the house now, Emily. I think we have a lot to talk about, and I don't know where this is going." With that, I led her into the kitchen where I sat her at the kitchen table and then sat down at the end of the table next to her. "I can explain," Emily mumbled while the tears ran down her face. "That's what I need an explanation," I answered. "What is the explanation, Emily?" "This goes back to college and a promise I made one night to Alex." "How many years ago did you promise him yourself, Emily?" I asked. "No, David, it wasn't like that. We were both drunk. Alex and I had been dating. He and I were an item. He was a hunk, and I liked him for a while. I was wondering if he was the one. Everyone thought we were, but I didn't want to commit, and he never really pushed for us to be intimate, though he had a real reputation as a lady killer. I started rooming with Rachel, and they began dating. For a while, he was going out with both of us, though. I guess Rachel and he ended up in bed soon after he started taking her out. Nothing serious for Alex and me, but Rachel and he were heading toward where they are now. Alex had an interesting reputation among the co-eds until I came along. There was a lot of competition to get a one-night stand with him, and he was supposed to be pretty special in bed. I wasn't a virgin. I told you that, but I was pretty particular about handing out my favors. One night, Alex and I were sitting around my room, sharing a few drinks while waiting for Rachel to come back from whatever she was doing. We started talking, and as we drank, we both got more and more daring. Somehow in our conversation, I told Alex that the only reason he and I hadn't been intimate was my fear of getting pregnant. That wasn't really the only reason, but it was one I could give him, and he had turned me on pretty hard on occasion. Alex was famous for not using a condom. He expected his partners to be on the pill. I don't know how now, but somehow I told him if there were no chance of him getting me pregnant, I'd spend an evening in bed with him. He kind of sneered at me and told me something like, "Yeah, right?" Anyway, we got to arguing, and after a while, I got a piece of paper and wrote a promissory note. I told him that if I could be sure he couldn't get me pregnant, I'd spend an evening in bed with him. When she paused, I was just staring incredulously at her. "How long ago was this?" I asked. "About 7 years," was her answer. Emily went on to tell me that the note was one of the jokes between Alex and her ever since. We broke the news of her pregnancy to Alex and Rachel 3 weeks ago, and after the initial congratulations, Alex and I had gone into their garage to look at a problem he was having. Once I was out of the room, Rachel had looked her in the eye and told her the promissory note must now be due. Emily had been shocked that Rachel even knew about it, and stunned to discover that Rachel was taking it seriously. When Alex and I came back, I remembered a case of Dutch beer I had been going to bring to the barbecue. Insisting it would only take a few minutes to get something special, I left the other 3 there and went home alone to pick up the beer. While I was gone, Rachel had raised the topic of the note again. Emily was surprised again to find that Alex had apparently believed the note was going to be honored. He was quite indignant to hear Emily was thinking of backing out of the agreement. This was all taking place after 3 hours of steady drinking, the last she would have until our baby finished breastfeeding. Emily had found herself agreeing to honor the old note before I returned. It had been decided between the three of them that she would entertain Alex last night. Emily, that's one of the strangest stories I've ever heard, and it's real hard for me to accept. I have to ask this: who is the father of the baby you are carrying? Emily shrank, and the tears began falling down her cheeks again. How many other notes are now outstanding, and how many have you paid up on to date? Was my next question. Emily screamed at me, none. David, don't. I love you. David, this happened. It is the only time. It can't happen again. Please, David, listen to me. It sounds crazy trying to explain it to you, but I felt obligated. It wasn't something I planned or wanted to do. I have never been unfaithful to you. Please, please believe me. And she fell to her knees, crying, covering her face with her hands. Emily, please, can I ask you some questions? Will you be honest with me? Yes, David. Ask me. I'll tell you. This was a one-time thing and not something I wanted to do. My doing it seems incredible to me now, but you are worth more to me than life. I looked down at where she knelt before me. My heart was aching, and my stomach hurt. This was my best friend, the person I wanted beside me for the rest of my life. But I had to know if this person was who I thought she was. Emily, could you have said no to this? Yes, I could have, but I felt my honor was involved. I was afraid to tell you, afraid you wouldn't understand. But I felt that if you were in my place, you would do the same thing. When the agreement was made, I was drunk, but when I was sober, I didn't throw it out. And when it was made, I didn't know you. It was not something I did to cheat on you. It was something I promised to a friend so dear at the time. In that place, it was right. Thinking for a moment, I replied. So you could have said no after you sobered up, but you felt it was right, something you owed your friend at the time. And these many years later, you felt you still owed the debt to the man your friend of the time had become. Is that right? Yes, she answered. Emily, think carefully. Was this something you were looking forward to? No, she shouted. After a while, I began thinking it wasn't real after all, but just a joke. But it wasn't a joke, it was real. Looking carefully into her eyes, I asked, what about over the past 2 weeks? Were you looking forward to this? Emily took a deep breath and answered, no, love, I wasn't. It was something I felt I had to do. It was an obligation, not a pleasure. I just continued looking at her. Emily looked down at the table. She whispered, okay, yes, David, I guess I was looking forward to it, but not like you're thinking. I've never even thought of cheating on you. Never wanted to. But all of a sudden, this was there. I felt I had to go through with it, and if I did, I saw no reason I shouldn't enjoy it. I never felt it was something I had to do because you were not enough for me. It was something I had to honor. So I rationalized that I might as well make it special because nothing like it would ever happen again. Taking a great shuddering breath, I let it out slowly. Emily, about 8 weeks ago, I called you on my cell phone while I was driving back from that conference. Remember, we teased for a few minutes, and then I asked if you wanted to meet me at the Hilton in Riverton. I asked you to come, and we could make a weekend together away from home. Maybe do some playful things. I think I actually used those words. Do you remember? Sure, David. It was a great weekend too, she answered with a tremulous little smile. Did you want to make that a great weekend for us? For me? I asked. What a question. Of course I did, and it was. We had a great time, and she gave me a real smile this time. Do you remember what you packed to take with you for that weekend, honey? I asked. Well, not really. I took a nice dress in case we wanted to go dancing, and we did, and some comfortable clothes to walk. Just a minute, dear. I have to turn the video on again to let you understand what this question is about, and I turned and walked back to our bedroom. Partway down the hall, I turned to make sure she was following me, and she was. Once there, I turned on the bedroom TV. I hit play on the remote. It opened with Emily still kneeling before Alex. She stood up and turned to the bed, which had her standing facing directly into the camera in the corner, which was recording her shame. Emily, what in the world are you wearing there? I asked. She blushed and answered, My black lingerie. Yeah, sweetheart, the set I got for Valentine's Day. Do you realize you have never worn it for me except to model it when I gave it to you? Well, sure, David, but there's been no place to do so. She suddenly stopped, looking confused. Well, you sure didn't wear it at the Hilton. I sure would have remembered. As I recall, you had gone home and changed into a peasant skirt and white blouse, the one that buttoned to the neck. When you got around to taking those off, which was after dinner when we decided to go dancing, you were wearing the white cotton panties and the bra I think you probably have on now. Do you remember what you wore to bed that night after we came back from dancing? In a small voice, she answered, my Mickey Mouse t-shirt. Looking her in the eye, I asked, Emily, you just told me the Hilton weekend was special, and the date with Alex wasn't. Yet you wore about the sexiest thing you own, something I bought you for us to share. For Alex, but not for me. What does that say to you? What does it shout to me? How special do you think you're placing me? Emily just looked at me, her shoulders slumping a little. Dear, I continued, if I didn't love you, we wouldn't be living in this house together. If I didn't think you were something special to me, I would not be married to you. But I get an unexpected telephone call that cancels my meeting last night and fall into one of the worst nightmares I could conceive of. Alex, one of my best friends, if not my very best friend, shows up when I should have been at my meeting. He is met at the door by my woman. She takes him back to her room. She has gone to some trouble preparing for a tryst and then gives him a damn good strip. And I see she has dressed her body to display something she hasn't done for me in well over a year. When I ask her about it, she says this meeting wasn't important to her, but she has gone to a lot of trouble dressing, putting up her hair, and applying makeup, things she hasn't done for me since we first got married. That tells me this meeting was very important to her. She considered it a treat that she had to prepare for. It also tells me that her time with me was very ordinary and of much lesser value. She wanted to treat the man, my friend, but she had no interest in treating me, her husband and partner. I saw you doing things for Alex you only do for me on special occasions. If then, in doing some things for him, you have refused to do for me. My wife blinked tears out of her eyes. David, it wasn't that way. It really wasn't. I love you. You are special to me. What can I do to convince you? I sat on the bed and just looked at her. I don't know just yet, Emily. I don't know what we can do, but I'm calling Alex and Rachel and asking them to come over tonight. From what you said, Rachel is already aware of what was going on. I looked at her a moment longer. Do you know if Alex and Rachel had anything else on their minds when this was set up? Emily shook her head no, and I dialed their number. Rachel answered, and I asked if she and her husband could come over for a few minutes this evening. While I was talking, Emily answered the door and collected the Italian food we had ordered. Neither one of us was hungry, but I forced myself to eat. I knew this was going to be a long night, and the emotions had just begun. Emily just sat and toyed with her food. I almost began to believe her when she told me again she loved me, and this was just a one-time thing. It was maybe 8 when the doorbell rang. Before I opened the door, I told Emily I believed there was more to this than she understood. When I opened the door to let Alex and Rachel in, they both gave me a smile, but I don't think it was my imagination that each of them gave Emily a little special smile. Alex, especially his look at my wife, was almost proprietary, and I noticed Emily cringed a little when she saw it. Sitting them down on the couch, I asked Emily to sit also and pointed to the couch beside Rachel. She chose instead to sit in her recliner to the side of the couch Rachel was sitting on. I kind of hemmed and hawed for a bit, kind of rambling on about several things, but I included the new monitoring system which I had been working on. I didn't tell them it was working or what it had shown me last night. Rachel and Alex were looking pretty puzzled, wondering why I had asked them over. Finally, I asked them if they would like a drink, joking that I'd better get into my problem or my audience was going to walk out on me. Everyone said yes to the drink, so I fixed one for everyone. We had been friends for so long I knew what each would want this time in the evening and in this situation. Handing Rachel her white wine, I gave Alex his whiskey and soda. What a waste of good liquor. I handed Emily the orange juice she wanted because of her pregnancy and took what looked like my gin and tonic over to the hassock sitting by the TV. Actually, it was straight tonic tonight. I needed to have everyone about me. Then I sat down on the hassock with my knees spread, my arms resting on them, and both hands hanging down between my knees, cradling my drink. I looked around at each of them, finally looking at Rachel. I asked, "What? was in it for you, Rachel? I don't quite understand. She looked puzzled, then asked, what was what, David? What are you talking about? Last night, girl. Why did you work so hard to set it up? Just as I finished talking, Alex sputtered and choked on the drink he had just taken. I looked at him. Alex, I know what you got from it, but was that all? Seems to me there must be more. I tried to look at both women at once, switching my eyes back and forth. Alex, I know your reputation as a playboy. One more notch doesn't seem worth it, particularly with what I think you were risking. Why, Alex? David, what are you talking about? He stammered out to me. Well, you see, guys, I was home last night. Chess was called off, and I was in the garage when you made your appointment with Emily and when you came in the door. Let me show you something. And here I flipped on the TV. Standing beside me, the picture that came up was live from the camera in the spare room. I was just completing hooking this up when you came over last night, Alex. Pretty good picture, isn't it? Emily had her face buried in her hands, and Alex's face went pale. Rachel just looked at me with this little sexy smile. So guys, what was this all about? I continued. Rachel crossed her legs, and one foot began bouncing up and down a little. What do you think it meant, David? She asked. Well, Rachel, I answered, you know you have a bit of a reputation too. Actually, it goes along with Alex. You folks have been pretty straight with us, but I've had a couple of comments at the chess club. I was pretty glad you folks hadn't said anything to us, but I'm guessing that's about to change right now, right, Rachel? Well, this wasn't exactly the way we wanted to bring it up, but yeah, I think you may be right, was her reply. I looked over at my puzzled wife. Emily, up to now I thought you were aware of this. Now I'm not so sure. Your friend and her husband, Alex here, have been in a kind of key club the past couple of years. I don't know how often, but every once in a while, a group of them get together on a Saturday night. They meet in a back room at Carlos Grill for dinner, and every couple brings one of their house keys hanging on a tag with their address on it. As they come into the back room at Tony's, they drop the key in a big barrel. It's kind of like the one you see at bingo games. After a nice dinner, and since the husbands and wives have driven separately, the wives all leave and drive to their own homes. The gals get home and get ready for some action, something with a guy they aren't used to and who can probably get them off better than the same old routine they have at home every night. After they've gone, the guys get a draw out of the key. As I understand the rules, each guy gets to look at the address, and if it's his own address, he holds it in his left hand and pulls out another key, then drops his wife's key back into the barrel. I understand some guys will check out an address, and if it's with some gal they had sex with recently or one they don't like for whatever reason, they will draw another key, but they can only draw twice. If they pull their wife's key the second time, they're out of luck, and I understand some guys have really gotten in trouble for showing up to surprise their own wife when she was expecting action. Anyway, then the guys all have a drink before heading off to their rendezvous for the weekend. Yeah, honey, it is for the whole weekend, not just a couple of hours or a night. I've had a couple of comments from some of the chess club wondering when I was going to join since we were so close with Rachel and Alex. Everyone involved with the Key Club thought we were swapping with them on the side. A lot of the other guys wanted to get into your pants. It wasn't just Alex here. The room was pretty quiet, and I looked at each of my companions carefully. Emily was gaping at me, clearly surprised and shocked at what I had just told her. Her eyes were huge. Rachel was giving me this little simpering smile, and her foot was bouncing a lot harder. Alex was looking smug and a bit relieved after hearing my description. Honey, I began, looking at Emily again, before we go any further, I think you should know something about your last night's lover. Emily's face went white again at my description. She clearly didn't want to be reminded just how precarious our marriage was at the moment. As you saw last night, Alex is pretty well endowed. Emily's face went completely red, and she buried her face in her hands again. Looking over at Alex, that smug look was permanent along with one of the biggest grins I'd ever seen. The look he was giving me was one of condescension, but I figured to get rid of that before the night was over. Alex is the prize at these drawings. I understand all the wives hold their breath, waiting to see if they have drawn the real blue blood stud bull for the weekend, just like you described for the co-eds in your college. Looking at everyone's face one more time, I added. So you see, Emily, you've already tasted the best. Alex was smirking at me, and when I looked at Rachel, she was smirking at Emily. Emily just seemed to be sinking into her chair, looking at me a little sickly. I just leaned back a bit on my hassock, then took a long drink of my tonic. Pretty bitter, but that's what my mouth tasted like anyway. Then I just sat and let the silence build. Alex was still looking very satisfied with himself, but it looked to me like Rachel wanted to say something. I just kept quiet and let the tension build some more. David, Rachel finally started. It's a pretty good deal, and all we do is add a bit of spice to the marriage. After all, we all get stale and tired of one another after a while. All we do is add some spice and keep the love and the marriage going. Ask Loverman here. He hasn't lost any of me he wants, and I think we've added some real nice variations to our lives this way. Isn't that right, Alex? Alex just grinned his stupid grin. She went on, anyway, we just thought to show you too that loosening up a bit wouldn't break you up. Just the contrary, it will give you each a boost, and actually, I'm pretty sure it will make you closer. Your friendship wouldn't be touched, and I know each of you can use a few new ideas to use in the old bedroom. No pressures on you folks, just think about it. We'll both be here when you make up your minds. This was the introduction and, in a way, the confession I had been hoping for. Keeping my voice as quiet and even as I could, I answered, well, Rachel, I appreciate your patience with me. I haven't talked this over with Emily, and I doubt I will do so. I'm not really interested in swapping or, as I was telling Emily this evening, in another partner for fun. My wife and I are intelligent, well-read, and imaginative people. We do not need to dip wicks and pull trains to improve our lives together. I think we will enjoy that life together for many more years, God willing. The last thing I feel I have to say bothers me a lot because it sounds like I am punishing Emily. That's not it at all. But Emily, as you have said several times today, Alex doesn't participate in safe practices. I have no idea of the medical condition of all of his many partners, nor does he. Really, what I do know is you are now carrying our child. You are going to have to visit your doctor and give him some kind of story to cover why you feel you need to be checked for infections. This is going to hurt both of us. We can't be together until we have you checked and proved negative. We can't pass something back and forth between us. Do you understand? And dear, looking over at our so-called best friends, I continued, I feel betrayed by both of you. I'm not sure which of you I feel angrier toward. In any case, we will have to put a kibosh on getting together for the foreseeable future. I turned the TV off, and popping the USB drive, I gave it to Emily. She grabbed today's newspaper sitting unopened on an end table, wadded up a number of sheets, placed them in the fireplace, and lit a match to them. After adding the drive to the pile, she and I stood and watched the fire grow and then burn that thing, with Emily feeding more paper to the fire until only burned black ash remained where the thumb drive had been. When I turned around, both Alex and Rachel were out cold. Well, the chemical worked. I made a phone call. Hey, Perez, your package is ready. 3 hours later, at midnight, my doorbell rang. I opened the door and welcomed Perez. You have something for me? He asked. I pointed to the 2 limp bodies in my room. Perez went back out and came in with 6 more men. They picked up Rachel, and as they went for Alex, I asked them to stop. I went upstairs and came down with a baseball bat. I need just a few swings. Perez smiled and put Alex on the ground. I knew the points I wanted to hit: the kneecaps, the ankles, and the 2 family jewels, all done in a few swift moves. Emily stood there with her mouth open. I wish he was awake. I wanted to hear the screams. He's all yours. They picked him up and took him out. Perez came in after 5 minutes and sat with me. Thanks for the samples. We needed them. My pleasure. Emily was still sitting with her mouth open. After Perez left, the night was cold, and Emily walked up to me and asked, what happens to them? They are going to Mexico. There we have some kids learning medicine. They need some samples they can practice on. My voice was cold and flat. What if someone comes looking for them? She asked. Perez will take care of that. You killed them. How can you be so heartless? You broke my heart and did not care what I would feel. You have no right to judge me. If you think that you can walk to the cops and sell me out, please try your luck. As per my understanding, I just ensured that they are useful to society. Emily was now shaking. You said that we will be back and we can be together. Well, my love, I lied. Harris, what is going to happen tomorrow morning? We will get the DNA test done for the unborn child. We will wait for the results. If the results say that I am the father, I will help with the birth. However, we will not remain married. You will not take any lover till my son is 13 years old. If you do, I will ensure you are very useful. Tomorrow evening, we walk to the divorce lawyer and file for divorce. You can have the house, and I will give you support money till you get a job. Do I make myself clear? Emily nodded and said, I didn't even know you were like this. I walked away and said, neither did I. The next day, we filed for divorce. For weeks later, we got the DNA report. It was my child. 5 months later, we were divorced. 2 months after that, my son was born. I spent a lot of time with him. Emily and I do meet and talk, but I could never love her again. She never took a lover, and I helped her with support for the next 5 years until my son could take care of himself. I never dated, and all my energy is only for my son. And yes, Perez did send me a big thank you gift. No one came looking for the 2 samples I had sent. Thanks for watching. How would you react if you discovered your partner's betrayal like this? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more shocking stories. The only good part about going to my wife's work event was being able to speed my Challenger down the open road. The downside? The faster I drove, the sooner I would arrive. The party was at the company's lodge, and there was a long 30-mile stretch of empty road on the way, no stop signs, no traffic lights, just a clear path for my Dodge to show off. The only catch was no gas stations or any stops along the way. Laura and I had been drifting apart ever since our daughters both graduated high school. I was hoping for just the opposite, but it was not to be. Laura insisted that I accompany her to this function even though I indicated that I did not want to go. Previously, she had gone by herself. Laura was a drinker, and I wasn't. I did have a beer occasionally. She was also a social butterfly, and I wasn't. For the last 2 years, I suspected that she was having an affair. At this point, I didn't care. I guess that was part of the reason we were drifting apart. I was biding my time, just looking for a way out of an unpleasant relationship. I needed a way to end the affair. I have to admit that I am probably the reason that my wife decided to seek greener pastures. I am, so to speak, a weird type of minimalist. I grew up in a very poor family. My brothers and I had far less than most kids our age. By that, I mean things like bicycles, toys, pets, fancy electronic gadgets, and stuff like that. It was almost like being Amish without the religion. I wasn't stupid, and I fully understood the way the normal world functioned, but couldn't bring myself to go along with it. I knew that it was important to stay out of debt, it was important to pay your bills, and it would also be prudent to put something aside for retirement. To live a comfortable life as a minimalist, you do not have to be a fanatic, but you do have to keep yourself under control. By allowing yourself a few indulgences, you can appear to be normal to most people. My biggest indulgence was my marriage and family. It was really difficult for me to find a woman who I felt could tolerate my eccentricity and who could accept my uniqueness. Laura was from a similar background as I was, and was used to living a frugal lifestyle. She didn't embrace it as I did, but she could tolerate it. The longer we were married, the more she seemed to normalize. What I mean is that she became less frugal and more average. I didn't like it, but I understood, especially after the girls were born, so that we would not appear to be weird. We bought a small practical house and started to wear better clothes. Laura was getting her hair done occasionally and became quite adept in grooming and makeup skills. We got 2 smartphones, last 2 years models. As the girls got older, Laura started to work. It was a minimum wage office job. Transportation was necessary, so we got her a small Nissan Sentra. Her wages just about paid for the car expenses, lunches, and her new wardrobe requirements. It was a wash, but I was happy with that. My name is David Carter. That is about as common a name as a man can get. I work as a parts puller for a local company that makes industrial compressors. The job is very repetitious, but I enjoy it. I was comfortable with both the position and the salary. At times, I was offered promotions but turned them down. I did not tell Laura. My second indulgence was one that I kept from my wife. I felt it would be prudent to save for our retirement. Every chance I got, I would buy a 1-ounce gold maple leaf. I had over 30 in my basement safe and was just starting. My final indulgence was a 1970 Dodge Challenger. My older brother Paul was killed working on an offshore oil platform. He left me the Challenger in his will. I was able to keep it up by myself, but the insurance premiums were a killer. Laura had done well working for Global Dynamics. She got regular raises and promotions. During the first 2 years, she talked about her job quite a bit, but then it started to taper off. Now she rarely mentions anything at all about work or the people she works with. I knew something was not right, but could not put my finger on it. I was hoping to get a better idea of what was going on tonight. The company gathering was sort of like a retreat. It was a 3-day weekend event. I felt out of place even having to go to it. I had met all of her associates at one time or another, and I did not like any of them. We left the interstate at Cedar Creek, and I was finally able to let the Challenger loose. She responded just as I knew she would. Laura was not comfortable with the speed but held her tongue. Yes, I did exceed the speed limit. No, I didn't care. Peter, what's the hurry? We have plenty of time to get there. Why don't you slow down a bit? I am not anxious to get there. You know damn well that I didn't want to go at all. I am just using this time to clean out the engine. She needs to run every once in a while. Please try not to be a spoil sport. This 3-day weekend is important to my career. Mr. Miller said it would be essential for you to be here also. Henry Miller was the company president. It was old money and an old business. Why? What do you mean? Why is it important for me to be at this company event? I don't understand. Peter, it is necessary that you completely understand my new position in the company so that you can give me the support and backing that I need to do my job. I still don't understand. I'm sure that Mr. Miller will be able to explain it to you when we get there. I have always supported you in the past. Why is it different now? My new position has a lot of unique responsibilities. David said that you should be exposed to them gradually so that you can fully understand them. It might be difficult for you to comprehend at first, but he assured me that you will come around. By the time we got to the lodge, my adrenaline was pumping. It didn't take a genius to understand what Laura was trying to say. It was going to be an interesting 3-day weekend. When we arrived, Laura walked into the lodge, leaving me to bring in the bags. I felt like I was being put in my place. Hey, nice wheels, Mr. Blake. What is it, a 69 or 70? It was Chris Turner, the company's resident golden boy. Hi, Steve. How are you doing? It's a 70. Steve introduced me to his wife, Emma. They were sitting out on the front porch, but it seemed as if everyone else was inside. I glanced around the parking area and guessed there were about 15 cars and one beat-up old truck at the end of the lot. We spent the next 5 minutes talking about the Challenger. What are you doing outside? Why aren't you and Emma inside with the others? It's not our type of crowd, Mr. Blake. We were hoping to leave early, but Mr. Miller insists that we stay around. We came up early today to help get things set up. The caterers all left about an hour ago. You're going to have to explain yourself. What's going on? Something seems off, but I don't know exactly what. I don't want to get you upset, but I think it has something to do with your wife. Are you staying the full 3-day weekend? No, that's why I got my truck parked over by the side, so I don't have to worry about getting out later. Things were getting more interesting by the minute. Well, I better get this stuff up to our room. Let me know before you leave, okay? Sure, Mr. Blake. Be careful. Don't do anything stupid. Luckily, it was only 2 small carry-on bags. As I entered the lodge, Mr. Miller caught my eye, smiled, and waved. Laura was waiting at the top of the stairs for me and looked a bit aggravated that it took me so long to get in. It's about time, Peter. We have a few hours to get ready for the evening. Get cleaned up and put on something presentable. It's going to be a special night, and I want everything to be perfect. If it's all right with you, I'm going to take a stroll around the property for a bit to wind down. I'll be back in plenty of time. I noticed that I got a little smirk as I left the room. There was a slight chill, which made my stroll a bit more pleasant. As I estimated, there were indeed 15 cars. They were mostly BMWs, with a few Autos and a Tesla thrown in. 4 of the autos had out-of-state license plates. I was a bit confused trying to figure out how a woman in Laura's position would qualify to fit in with people of that caliber. She, or should I say we, were definitely out of our class. Something was not right. I noticed that Steve and Emma were loading their bags in the truck. I waved and walked over to chat a bit. I see that Mr. Miller decided to let you leave. Not really. We are sort of sneaking out. I don't feel comfortable here, Mr. Blake, Emma quickly added. Could you do me a small favor and stick around until after the evening buffet? I'm a bit worried also, and I would appreciate it. I have no idea what's going on, but I don't like it. Great minds think alike, Steve said. Emma blushed a little at my feeble attempt at humor. I think we can. There were crab and oysters on that serving line. I think I was going to like Steve. I did dress up as my wife insisted. Before we got to the buffet, our hostess took my arm and walked me to a quiet alcove. We are so pleased that you chose to come tonight to support Laura. This is a big step in her career, and it's important that she has your full support. The increase in salary and benefits is very substantial, and I'm sure you will be happy with it. Excuse me for asking, but what is the position we're talking about? Laura has been a bit evasive when I ask her about it. She usually just blows me off and tells me to wait until tonight. Nothing to worry about, Peter. I think she just wants to surprise you. You didn't answer my question. There's no official title. I guess you could just say she's a personal assistant. I see. Well, the buffet looks good. Thanks for the explanation. I spent the next hour or so sampling everything on the line. Laura was busy socializing with the important people. So Steve, Emma, and I got to spend a little more time together. We were just wrapping things up when Mr. Miller came over. Peter, Laura said that you brought your sporty little car with you tonight. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind making a little booze run for us? I smiled and nodded my head. There are 3 cases of wine at the liquor store in Cedar Creek. They're already paid for, so all you have to do is drive down and pick them up. There shouldn't be any problems, but if there are, just call me. Make sure you take your phone with you. I would be glad to, Mr. Miller. They'll let Laura know and be on my way. As he walked away, I glanced over at Steve. Meet me outside in 5 minutes. Laura just smiled when I informed her that Mr. Miller had asked me to help her. Her only comment was, don't forget your phone. Interesting that they both emphasized the same thing. Steve, I need a favor. He smiled as I threw him the keys to the Challenger. You're serious? Drive it down to Cedar Creek and pick up the 3 cases of wine at the liquor store for Mr. Miller. I have a feeling that there might be a problem of some sort which will result in a delay, if you know what I mean. Steve smiled and nodded. Erase my phone. Just put it on the dash. If it rings, don't answer it. Whatever you do, don't turn it off. Any questions? How long do you want us to stay away? At least 2 hours, and top off the gas before you start back to the lodge. Enjoy. It was a bit chilly outside, but at least I had the foresight to put on a comfortable jacket. Now all I had to do was wait and watch. You could see most of the inside of the lodge from various places on the back porch. A thermos of coffee would have been nice, but I didn't plan that far ahead. I found a comfortable spot where I could see in and not be spotted. Laura appeared to be the center of attention. I still didn't know why, but I had a good idea. She was smiling, laughing, and mingling like a celebrity. About 20 minutes later, Mr. Miller and Laura carefully looked at Laura's cell phone. I knew exactly what they were doing checking my location. Well, thanks to Steve, I was now just about into Cedar Creek. They both smiled as Mr. Miller held up his hand and started to speak. Unfortunately, I could not make out what was being said, but everyone in the room seemed to be quietly approving of what they heard. It almost seemed like low-level applause. Henry Miller walked over and took Laura's hand. They started up the main staircase and stopped. He raised his and her hands up in the air similar to a victory salute, and they both laughed. I was able to hear the cheering in the room as they ascended the stairs. I still had about an hour and a half until the Challenger would be back. I decided to take my time and enjoy myself. I always had my trusty buck pocket knife with me. It was a gift from my daughters about 2 years ago. It was good steel and held a sharp edge. I looked over my target area and figured that I would start with the cars closest to the lodge. I took my time. There was no rush. I carefully placed each valve stem in my jacket pocket. I didn't want to lose any, and I didn't want to litter the driveway. 15 cars and 60 valve stems. I had almost an hour to go. What to do? 4 of the cars were locked. The rest were all open. So I started at the closest one to the lodge again and removed the registration slips. Some were on the visors, but most of them were in the glove boxes. I had no idea what I was going to do with them, but thought that they might be nice to have in the future. I still had a 30-minute wait until Steve got back. I decided that the valve stems on the spare tires had to go. Since I had access to the cars, I also had access to the trunks. 20 minutes later, I had 8 more valve stems. 2 of the cars had no spare tires. I know it was petty and juvenile, but it gave me a bit of light satisfaction. I am not a big fan of confrontation, so anything that I did or intended to do would be low and sneaky. I had no self-image problems, so I did not feel the need to come across as manly or heroic. They'll let all of the alpha males assume that role. 20 minutes later, the challenger returned. Steve and Emma both seemed to have enjoyed the ride. He verified that there was indeed a delay at the liquor store, as I expected, and it looked like it was pre-planned. There were no calls to my cell phone while they were gone. I turned it off and took out the SIM card. They were anxious to get home. I thanked Steve, wished him a safe trip, and strongly recommended that he find another job as soon as possible. I am sure that the cases of wine in the truck were pretty expensive. It was an easy problem to solve. I just put all 3 cases on the front porch of the lodge. There was no way that I wanted them to accuse me of stealing anything. The trip home was relaxing. There wasn't too much at the house that was important to me. A few personal papers, my laptop, and my gold maple leafs. Originally, I was going to torch the house before I left, but that would have made Laura a martyr. I didn't want to do that. I was on the road within 2 hours. I did not feel the necessity to leave the traditional note or wedding ring. Let her figure it out. I was in no rush and had no destination in mind. I drove for 2 days. It was Thursday morning when I called into work and gave notice. I requested that my final check be sent to my parents' house in Mapleton. They were not happy that I quit without notice. I apologized but did not offer an explanation. You can always count on a good breakfast at Diner King. I picked up a local newspaper on the way in and found an interesting help-wanted ad for a local supermarket. They were looking for a person to stock shelves between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. After breakfast, I checked out the market. It was in an eclectic older section of Bridgeport. I spent the next hour driving around the neighborhood. There were a lot of older craftsman cottages and a few mobile homes in the immediate area. I could be happy in a small trailer but was hoping for a step up. Then I happened to stumble across a sign offering a garage apartment for rent. I hadn't inquired about the market job yet, but didn't want to lose out on the garage apartment. The garage was not included, but when I offered $75 a month more rent, they went for it. It was a small 1-bedroom unit with only a half bath. It was sort of furnished bed, dresser, table, and chairs. The rent was right, and the location was right, so I took it. I would solve the bath problem later. At least I had a home for the challenger. The supermarket situation was a bit different. They had plenty of applicants, but not too many that they felt comfortable leaving alone at night in the store. I explained my situation to the owner and didn't mince any words. What clinched the job for me was when I offered to work under the table, with no benefits, and at $1 less than they wanted to pay. They never even asked for my social security number. I was happy, and they were happy. It was a 10-minute walk from the apartment. I spent the rest of the day getting settled in my new home. The landlord gave me the access code to his internet, which I thought was nice. After a quick trip to the local Goodwill, I had some kitchen stuff and a small microwave. I also got some linens and cleaning supplies. That night, I canceled my life insurance policies. I decided not to mess with the banking or credit cards. What could she hurt? Both of our daughters were now married. That made my leaving a bit easier. No grandchildren yet, but I am sure it wouldn't be too much longer. I called my daughter, Anna, and let her know that I was okay. I asked her to be available to help her mother if necessary. Anna was aware that I had left, but Laura had given her no other information. She promised to update her sister, Sophie. I deleted all the calls from my wife and turned my phone off again. I needed a shower maybe tomorrow. Not everything was perfect. I had to find a secure place for my gold. I realized that what I had was not considered to be significant, but to me, it was important. For some strange reason, I ended up getting a safety deposit box in Charlotte, Alabama. I was hoping that they couldn't connect it to me in Bridgeport. Of course, I was completely wrong, but I felt that I had at least tried. It was almost a 2-hour drive, but I didn't mind. The garage door at the apartment was fairly secure, but I installed a new hasp and a heavy-duty lock just to make sure. I had to protect my baby. It didn't take long to get settled in at my new job. The first 3 nights, they had a man work with me, and then they left me on my own. I didn't have to do anything in the produce or the meat department. The biggest pain was in the frozen food section. I had everything under control after the first 2 weeks. For 25 down and 12 a month, I got a Planet Fitness membership, which solved my shower problem. The big downside was that I had to give them a credit card number. I had to make another trip to Charlotte to get a credit card at my new bank. I was beginning to see how hard it was to get completely off the grid. Some modifications were going to be necessary. I had no idea how hard Laura would try to look for me, or if she would try at all. To hell with it. I would deal with that problem when it came. In no time, I had the routine down pat. I started work at 10 p.m. and finished at 6 a.m. It was a 20-minute jog or 30-minute walk to Planet Fitness. I had originally joined primarily just for the shower facilities, but gradually started using the other gym equipment. By the end of the first month, I was getting almost 2 hours of gym exercise every day. I felt better, and I was also losing a little weight. I never considered myself to be heavy, but I was a bit flabby. It felt good to get back into a routine. I was comfortable with my new job and enjoyed it. It was repetitious, but it was also different. Hard to explain, but I'm sure you can figure out what I mean. I did my job, and they left me alone. The gym was also a good selection. In no time at all, I had decided what exercises I liked to do and which ones to avoid. I discovered that I got no pleasure or enjoyment working with heavy weights. Since I was running to my workout every day, the treadmills held no interest for me. I started each day with the Planet Fitness circuit workout. That took about 30 minutes. I then spent 20 minutes on the rowing machine, 20 minutes on the stair stepper, and finished up with 20 minutes on an upright bike. I never got a TV, but I did get a used desktop computer with a nice-sized monitor. My daily entertainment consisted mostly of YouTube videos. I didn't cook much but did find that my eating habits sort of evolved a bit. Although it was not my intention, I found myself drifting toward a keto-type diet. Combining that with my odd working hours, I realized that I was also doing a bit of fasting. After 3 months, I was feeling better and losing weight. It was time to call my daughters again. This time I called Sophie. "Hi, Sophie. It's your dad. Well, it is about time. We were all concerned about you. Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm great. Don't worry about me. I've always been able to take care of myself. I'm calling just to make sure your mother is doing okay. Mom is doing great. It seems like she got a raise at work and loves her job. She is, however, extremely pissed at you. She said that you deserted her at her promotion celebration and then left home like a hurt little boy. Those are the words she used. She said you were jealous of her success. Well, I'm sorry, but I can't add anything to that. Until she's ready to tell you the truth, that's all I have. She said that things are a bit tight without your income, but with her raise, she can handle it. Well, I'm happy for her. Did she tell you anything about her new job? Just that she's making more money and gets to travel a lot." I didn't respond. After a slight pause, Sophie started up again. "Will you be coming home for Christmas?" "I don't think so. They'll try and send something for you and Anna. We don't need or want anything, Dad. Would rather have you here. Sorry about that. I have to go now. Tell Anna I said hello. Bye." I felt a little down in the dumps. I got the feeling that my daughters didn't understand the situation and felt that I was the reason for all the problems. I wasn't happy about that, but did not feel that I was obligated to explain myself. It was apparent that there was no remorse on my wife's side. I found myself getting a little bitter. From what my daughter said, Laura was doing quite well without me. I still didn't understand why she wanted me at home. I finished off my case of pale ale and spent the 3-day weekend despondent. My beer consumption had been increasing as the weeks went by. I found things improving nicely. I was doing well at work and got a raise that I was not expecting. They gave me free rein as far as my duties were concerned, and in a very short time, I had streamlined and improved the stock replenishment system. I provided a weekly report that they used to set inventory levels and establish reordering intervals. The store's overall computer system was already doing this, but they seemed to appreciate the manual input. My living arrangements were ideal for my situation and well within my budget. My weight was down, and I was building some muscle. In the right lighting, I could see a six-pack. I stopped shaving and now had a full head of hair, just long enough to make a small ponytail. My whole image seemed to have changed, and I seemed a bit fearsome. My gym workouts were getting easier and a bit longer. An unexpected side effect was that I was also making a few friends at the gym. They were not really friends, but more like acquaintances. I was very careful around the female gym rats because I did not want any impropriety problems. With the guys, it didn't matter. In fact, we were poking fun at each other regularly. There was, however, one very unusual union that cropped up. Her name was Linda, or at least that was what everybody called her. She was not very friendly and seldom talked to anyone. I turned out to be the exception. She was there every morning and worked steadily for at least 2 hours. It was an intense workout, not a frilly yoga type routine. I guess that she was in her early 40s or so, hard-looking, and always wore sweatpants and a sweatshirt. All the other females were showing off their bodies with tight latex and skimpy outfits. Not Linda. I took a good bit of razzying because I was the only male in the whole gym that she talked to or even looked at. I didn't encourage her, but I also didn't turn her away in any fashion. To be honest, I was a bit flattered. Several months passed, and I had not contacted either my daughters or my wife. I just could not force myself to do it. I made several trips to Charlotte to add to my gold maple leaf collection. Then things started to change. "Peter, could I speak with you a moment?" This was not a usual conversation starter with Linda. She called me Peter when all the guys used Pete. Come to think of it, she had never really referred to me by my name before. "Sure, no problem. Is there something that I can help you with?" As a matter of fact, there is. We both took a bench and got comfortable. "I have a company affair that I have to attend Friday evening, and I need an escort. I will take care of all the expenses, and I only need you to go with me. I notice that you don't drive, so I will also provide transportation. If it is necessary, I can reimburse you." I hesitated, and she quickly picked up on it. "I'm sorry, did I do or say something wrong?" "No, not at all. It's just that I have a few skeletons in the closet, so to speak. If you can work around them, they'll be happy to help you out." "Okay, what are the problems?" "First of all, I am married." "Oh crap, you never mentioned a wife. I guess that queers the whole deal." "No, not at all. I just wanted to let you know up front. I have not seen or talked to my wife in over 9 months. I don't even know if I'm still married." "Have you filed for divorce or separation?" "No." "Next, I do not have anything appropriate to wear. No suit, jacket, dress shirts, or regular shoes. I have no use for any of that stuff, so I don't have it." "No problem. I can take care of that. This is why I am asking a week ahead. I do work nights, but I think I can get the evening off with no problem." "I'm glad you solved that one." She smiled when she said that. "What else? Do you want me to shave or anything?" "Peter, I like your beard, and I like your hair. But to be honest, you are a bit scruffy. Would you mind if my stylist looked you over Friday afternoon?" "Stylist?" She smiled, and I groaned and nodded that it was okay. So started my relationship with Linda, professionally known as Linda Crawford, attorney at law. Tuesday, I ended up at Joss A. Bank. Not really a high-class place, but a step above anything I had ever been at. Linda had arranged for my visit ahead of time. I ended up with 2 pairs of pants and 2 sport coats. They topped it off with a couple of shirts and a few ties. I exerted myself a bit by adding 2 turtleneck shirts to the pile. I always liked them and thought that they would look good with sport coats. Linda had prepaid everything. On the way home, I picked up a new pair of decent shoes and some underwear. I needed the new underwear because of my recent weight loss. The shoes were moccasin style but still classy. My visit to the stylist went well on Friday. The guy that was taking care of me was easy to get along with and did a good job. He left me with a neatly trimmed beard and changed my ponytail into a sort of short, modified mullet. I don't know the actual term, but it was long in the back. He assured me that it would be a lot easier to maintain. I liked it. He didn't talk much about Linda, but did say that I was a lucky fellow. Linda showed up at the apartment at 6 on the dot. She did not get out of the car, but did a short beep. The Lexus looked out of place in my neighborhood. I went with the gray jacket and gray turtleneck. I thought that I looked pretty good, but I have no point of reference. I was thankful that she was driving because I did not know my way about the city. "Linda, before we go in, can you explain what exactly I am expected to do or not do tonight?" "The first hour or so will probably be socializing. You don't have to get involved with any of that. Most of the people here will be big-feeling snobs that you don't want to have anything to do with. Avoid them if you can. Mainly, I want you to stay close to me and keep the leeches away. Try not to be obvious, But don't let any of them elbow you out. See that I have a drink in my hand at all times, ginger ale or mineral water. Be friendly and agreeable, and whatever you do, don't lose your cool. Basically, you are arm candy. Make them think we're a couple. I never thought of myself as that kind of a guy. I don't have a lot of experience doing things like that. Are you going to be able to handle it? You bet. Oh, is there any food? After about an hour, we'll each get a 350 plate of rubber chicken and listen to some speeches. When that's over, there'll be more glad-handing. Oh, by the way, you look good. It was at that point that I realized that I had not complimented her on her dress or her hair. I really was out of my element. The first part of the evening went exactly as she had explained. I found my role to be a bit easier than I had anticipated. The room was full of unattached males, all of them in expensive suits and wearing big watches. Linda did look good, and most of them knew she wasn't married. Quite a few of them took the time to stop by and chat her up a bit. They were testing the waters, so to speak. I found myself giving them all a squinty-eyed stare like Charles Bronson. Amazingly, it worked every time. I left her side to refresh her drink. Another vulture swooped in. A few of them brought her drinks, which she quietly handed off to me to dispose of. Linda glanced at me a couple of times and sort of smiled. At last, we got to sit down. 200 chicken dinners appeared from nowhere. It was a pathetic plate of food. I am not what you would call a fussy eater, but this was different. I kept thinking about the 350. Linda sort of leaned over to me. Peter, do you want to blow this place? She tried to use a Bogart accent, but it didn't work. I didn't answer her. I just stood up, took her hand, and we quietly left. I don't think anyone even noticed. When we hit the parking garage, she kicked off her shoes and threw me the Lexus keys. Find us some real food, Peter. 20 minutes later, we were at Southern Barbecue. We each had a full rack of ribs and a long neck beer. She was no stranger to the Tabasco. Both of us ignored the side fries. The bibs were eagerly welcomed. While we were eating, I noticed one unusual thing. Her evening gown had long sleeves. Most of the women's gowns all had short sleeves or none at all. She was also still barefoot, and it didn't seem to bother her at all. Things quickly got back to normal. My evening with Linda was enjoyable, even though it didn't end up with any intimacy. We continued with our normal gym relationship. 3 weeks later, Linda had another function that required an escort. I accepted, of course. I felt obligated to explain the situation to my boss, and he found it to be quite amusing under the circumstances. He told me that it would not be necessary to ask permission for time off, just leave him a note. He more or less told me that I was responsible for my own time and to handle it accordingly. Linda's daily gym workout was pretty intense. She kept her heart rate up, and she sweated quite a bit. She was always fully clothed. Most of the female gym rats wore sports bras and shorts. Linda wore sweatshirts and long pants. It didn't seem to make sense, but I wasn't going to bring it up. Our second night out was similar to the first, except that there was no food, and there was more drinking. More drinking meant more vultures sniffing around. Every other guy who approached her brought a fresh drink. I was busy most of the evening collecting and disposing of the unwanted glasses. One of the more obnoxious guys finally got on my nerves. I took him aside and quietly told him that if he hit on my fiancée one more time, I was going to clean his clock. He disappeared for the rest of the evening. So did a lot of the other sleazes. I didn't realize that I had become so menacing. We went for sushi after the gathering, but ended up eating 4 worth of sashimi. It was another fun, platonic evening. 2 days later, Linda surprised me while I was on the rowing machine. Why didn't you tell me we were engaged? I was a bit embarrassed yesterday when some of my colleagues asked me about it. She didn't wait for an answer, but she did smile. I called Anna. She said that Laura had been avoiding her and Sophie. All Anna knew was that Laura was traveling a lot, and that people were staying over at the house on a regular basis. I asked her if her mother had filed for divorce, and she had no idea. It had been several weeks since she or Sophie had had any contact. For some reason, I was pissed off. The more bottles I emptied, the worse it got. The next morning, I got one of the flat rate boxes at the post office and mailed 50 valve stems to Henry Miller at Global Dynamics. I included a short note: thanks for a fun evening. It had been well over 2 years since the party, but I was pretty sure he would remember it. I missed the gym that day. I didn't want to work out with a hangover. I did get the third degree from Linda the next day. I promised to explain everything to her the next time we had dinner together. She picked me up at 6 that night. Linda took me to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. It was my first time in a place like that. I did dress up nice for her. She listened quietly and passed no judgment the entire night. I was back at my apartment in time for my work shift. Linda had one more question for me the next day at the gym. Did I know any of the people who were at the lodge that night? When I told her that I had the names and addresses of everyone that was there, her eyes lit up. After our workout, she stopped by the apartment, and I gave her an envelope with 8 car registrations. She grabbed them and kissed me on the cheek. There are 15 kinds of lawyers. Linda was a personal injury lawyer. She tried to explain it to me, but I just smiled and asked her what this was going to cost me. All I got for an answer was another kiss on the cheek. 3 days later, I got a call from my daughter, Sophie. Laura had called her to see if she knew where I was. Some sort of problem had cropped up at Laura's workplace, and she was in the middle of it. She was not happy and needed to talk to me immediately. Sophie refused to tell her anything. I wonder if David got those valve stems. I called Linda and told her I would be picking her up in 20 minutes. Her office was in an upscale strip mall. It was nice, but not too flashy. Linda had never seen the Challenger. The subject of my car ownership never came up before. The sound of the engine preceded my arrival and resulted in several curious onlookers from her office as she walked out to the car. I came around to open the door for her and smiled at all the gawkers. Linda was laughing when she got in the car. Well played, Peter. Well played. I guess you'll want an engagement ring now? In good time. Don't rush it. I kept the Challenger under control until we crossed the Haw River. Then I started to let her open up a bit. Route 70 going into Charlotte is a nice stretch of road, but not the best place to show off. We were seated at Dreamland Barbecue within 2 hours. Peter, all of the people who were at the lodge that night were served today. What do you mean, served? It's a lawsuit. The actual term is malicious conduct contributing to the deterioration of a marriage. There is really such a thing? It appears that all of the required categories had been met. Their conduct was intentional, it was extreme, and it caused you severe emotional distress. Since we had only sued for $75,000, they were advised by their insurance companies to just go ahead and pay it and avoid any public litigation. It was covered by their insurance, so it was no great personal loss to them. You mean we might get some money out of this? Peter, I already got 3 checks. There might be more coming. Do you think this might have something to do with Laura getting fired? I'm pretty sure that it was. Is this going to screw up my divorce? Did you file yet? No, not yet. I was going to ask you to help me with it. Linda had a really big smile on her face. Peter, pack a small bag and get the Challenger ready. We are going to take a road trip to see your wife. We will leave Thursday morning early. Now I was smiling. We left at 6 a.m. and checked into the Sheraton 10 hours later. The Challenger was happy. I called Anna and asked her to bring Laura and Sophie to lunch at the Lakeside Motor the next day. The conversation at dinner was a bit awkward. Picking and choosing off the Red Lobster menu was fun, and we ended up spending more money than we anticipated. We didn't care because it was a celebration of sorts. Our conversation was varied and convoluted while we were both cautious about avoiding the elephant in the room. We were spending our first night together. We had been friends without benefits for over 2 years. The last thing I wanted to do was make her feel uncomfortable. While I won't get into the details of the evening, I will say that it was not nearly as traumatic as we anticipated. We were both a little bit rusty, but managed to get through it with the expected results. She seemed relieved that I was not repulsed, and I was happy that it was not near as bad as she led me to believe. We were a couple of happy fools. We had a late breakfast in the morning. Laura and the girls were waiting at the table when we arrived. I wore one of my new sport coats with a dark turtleneck. I looked good. Linda wore one of her lighter business suits, sort of casual professional. My wife and my daughters looked at me in amazement. Laura, Anna, Sophie, this is Linda Crawford, my confidant and attorney. Linda, my wife Laura and daughters Anna and Sophie. It was awkward, but the best I could do. Before we could get to any meaningless chit-chat, the waiter showed up to take the drink orders. I'm not hungry. If you don't mind, I'll just have coffee. Laura was first to break the silence. I quickly glanced around the table and came to the same conclusion. Why don't you just bring us 4 coffees and leave a pot on the table? The waiter nodded, and everyone seemed relieved at the decision. It's nice to see you again, Peter. Would you care to bring us up to date on what you've been doing the last 2 years? Laura had a slight smirk when she said it. Just working and allowing you the freedom to find yourself, or whatever you were doing. Linda slightly kicked me under the table. I needed you, and you deserted me. You might have needed somebody, but it wasn't me. Mom, Dad, quit it. I'm sure you didn't set up this meeting so that you could sit and snipe at each other. Dad, what are we here for? Sophie was being very assertive. I could see that this was going to be a very short gathering. I was at a loss. I glanced over to Linda for a hint of some kind as to how to go forward. She ignored me but took over the conversation. Linda reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She handed it across the table to Laura. Mrs. Blake, this is a divorce petition. I think that you will find it very fair. I suggest that you take it to your attorney and have him look it over. Anna and Sophie both looked astonished. It was easy to see that they were not expecting this. Laura, however, had a big grin on her face. She didn't take the envelope from Linda, but reached under the table and got a similar one from her purse. You stupid jerk. I divorced you 8 months ago for desertion. You never got a copy because I didn't know where to send it. It is final. Whatever you got here is worthless. There is nothing that you have that I want anyhow. Her smile turned into a big smirk. The waiter returned with our coffee and a full urn for the table. Just as Laura was getting up, she smiled at Linda and me and gave the girls a weird look before leaving. She left both envelopes on the table. Dad, can we all stay for lunch? I hear that they have a really good quiche here, Anna said. Linda and I had a small laugh and asked the waiter for menus. Linda, Anna, and Sophie had a great lunch and conversation. I felt like I was eating alone. I never did understand women too well. The girls all exchanged phone numbers and promised to keep in touch. After returning to the room, I started packing. Peter, I thought that we were staying another night? We are, but not here. Hurry up and pack. 1 hour and 30 minutes after that, we were in Madison, Maryland. 30 minutes later, Linda Crawford became Linda Blake. We spent the night in Lexington, Virginia. I wanted to go further, but we didn't make it. We got a house with a 3-car garage. That's another story. The girls said that Laura had a fit when she found out I got $1.8 million from Global Dynamics. Laura moved to Idaho. I don't know why, but I think it has to do with the $1.8 million she missed. Thanks for watching. What do you think of David's choices? Would you have done the same? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories. See you next time. Jacob Roberts checked the dashboard clock once more, convinced that at least 10 minutes must have gone by since the last time he looked. It had only been 2. Each minute spent driving made him feel more trapped. He was eager to get home and tell Alice, his wife, the exciting news. His annual performance review had taken place earlier that day completely unexpectedly, as it had been scheduled a month ahead of time. The details of the meeting still lingered in his thoughts. Receiving a summons to his senior executive's office, Martin had entered to find his personnel folder on the desk before David, his boss. The next 20 minutes could best be described as a meeting of the Jacob Roberts fan club, as David went from one glowing commendation to another. However, it was the last 10 minutes of the meeting that Martin considered to be the highlight of his day, heck, the highlight of his career. I've been discussing this with the other vice presidents, David explained, and would like to offer you a choice between 2 positions. Martin could only sit there stunned as David continued. Your first option would be to formally take my old position heading up the department, David informed him. This wasn't entirely unexpected, as Martin had been pretty much doing the job already. Your other option, David continued, suddenly breaking into a grin, would be to head up the team that will be launching our new Amsterdam location. Martin was certain the look on his face was priceless, being equal parts shock and confusion. David, for his part, just chuckled and waited for his friend and subordinate to process what he just heard. After a few moments, he continued, in a nutshell, you'd be promoted to a senior executive position and would be responsible for our European operations, David concluded, pushing a piece of paper across the desk for Martin to review. The benefits outlined were generous, to put it mildly. Taking a long moment to compose himself, Martin gently returned the page to the desktop and directed his attention to the air of such glad tidings. "I'd love to be able to give you an answer right now," he began, "but I can't do so until I have the chance to discuss this with Alice." "I understand," replied David. "Why don't you take the rest of the day off, and you can give me your answer in 2 weeks." At last, Martin's car pulled into his driveway, the clock on the dash reading 6. Practically bouncing in his seat as he waited for the garage door to finish opening, he was surprised to see the garage empty. Alice must have had a meeting somewhere, he realized, and decided to wait until she returned home to surprise her with his good news. After a few minutes' thought, Martin decided he could make the most of this opportunity and take care of those projects around the house had been meaning okay, promising to get done for these long months. A quick trip to the master bedroom saw him shortly changed into jeans and a ratty t-shirt, and he began his new chores with a vengeance. One by one, all those honeydew items were being crossed off. Finally, the only task left was to tackle his office. Oddly enough, she called it his when it needed cleaning, though they both made ample use of it. But this thought wasn't one he considered as he entered the room, a large garbage bag in his hand. He had decided that the mountain off clutter on the desk should be the first thing to go. So he reviewed each item before setting it aside for filing or circular, filing it right then and there in the previously mentioned garbage bag. Junk mail, junk mail, junk mail, he muttered as he scanned each item. Suddenly, he stopped. The page in his hand was a credit card statement, one he was certain Alice had canceled months ago. He quickly checked the date and found that the statement was current. His eyes, however, continued down the page, where the lingerie stores and men's clothing stores didn't stand out nearly as much as the 5 lines from the Royal Plaza Hotel downtown. Martin's world suddenly shut down as his mind retreated to those happier times in the past. Martin was the oldest of 4 children born to Peter and Linda Carter. Raised in Dallas, New York, he had been a bright student and had gone on to the University of Dallas on an academic scholarship, where he pursued a degree in computer engineering. While not really shy, he also had no need to be terribly outgoing. He attended the occasional party, made friends, and dated from time to time. His studies, however, were his first priority until he met Alice Miller. He had found himself at an outdoor party, one of those last gasp bashes before the spring semester ended and everyone left for the summer. People, perhaps realizing that their time there was coming to an end, seemed to party harder, play rougher, and be louder and more outrageous. At parties like that one, anything could and sometimes did happen, and it was for that very reason that Martin didn't normally attend them. However, the guest of honor was a good friend of his who was completing his final semester, so Martin had decided to stop in for a beer or two. It only took a moment, really, for chance to bring the two of them together. Both had been waiting in line for a beer when someone had an accident and sent 2 full glasses of brew flying in their direction. Neither Martin nor the girl in front of him had come away unscathed. He remembered the beer that had hit him had soaked the front of his shorts, while she had found her shirt completely soaked. While embarrassed for his own state of being, Martin found himself mortified by the situation this unknown woman found herself in. Though, truth be told, he also couldn't help but notice just how attractive she was now that the liquid had turned her white blouse into a sheer see-through garment. To her everlasting relief, suddenly there was a large denim button-down shirt thrust into her hands, and Martin, now in just his t-shirt and soaking wet shorts, helped rush her to the nearest bathroom, where she quickly donned the dry and opaque garment. Martin, now that the girl had been taken care of, truly realized just how embarrassing a situation he was in, stopping only long enough to let his friend, the guest of honor, know what had happened. He beat a hasty retreat back to his apartment, chalking the entire night up to the fickle nature of life in general and fate in particular. It was 3 days later that he suddenly found himself face-to-face with the girl from the party, standing outside his apartment door. He found her absolutely intriguing as she returned the shirt he had donated and had thought was gone forever. It turned out that she had asked around at the party and had spoken with his friend, the guest of honor, who had given her his address. They parted with each other's phone numbers, which led to coffee, then to a date, followed by dating, and at long last, to engagement and marriage. Martin recalled how all their friends said they made a beautiful couple, and he supposed it was true in Alice's case. 5 foot 7 inches tall and weighing all of 120 pounds, with hair lustrous and rich brown with red accents, a million-megawatt smile, and green eyes. She had an almost enchanting beauty to her. Her body, while most definitely possessing all the right curves in the right places, was also remarkably athletic and toned. No, she'd never walk a New York runway, but hers was a timeless beauty that might have seen Greek warriors launch 1,000 ships at one time. Martin was no slouch himself, though he was one of those men who really didn't know just how attractive women found him. Over 6 feet tall, he was trim and muscular, having been involved in martial arts since childhood. The exercise had been a wonderful way to take out his teenage angst and had benefited his body wonderfully. Most wouldn't notice this, as Martin wasn't vain enough to wander around naked to the waist for no reason whatsoever, but an attractive couple they most certainly were. Upon graduation, Martin went to work for a major player in the information security and encryption field, while Alice put her degree in business management to good use and began working for a community service organization as their office manager. Their marriage was a simple affair. Neither was much for horse-drawn carriages or flocks of doves flying to celebrate. Instead, they focused on making a wonderful event for themselves and their guests. It was a testament to the two that virtually every single person invited attended, and the church was filled to overflowing for their nuptials. The reception was a heady affair with laughter, tears of joy and happiness in ready abundance, Martin recalled. But it wasn't all happiness and joy, and Martin soon found himself recalling how, after 6 years of marriage, Alice approached him to discuss starting a family. By this time, Martin had been earning enough to pay all their bills for quite some time, and she had set all her income aside so that they could make a down payment on a house. This would be the perfect time for her to quit taking the pill and for them to start building a family. It was a major decision, and they discussed it for quite some time before he at last was comfortable that they weren't rushing into this blindly. A smile crept across Martin's face as he recalled the joy of their eager attempts to get pregnant, the nights and the more than occasional day of wild sexual abandon. But the smile evaporated as his memories continued. The days and nights trying to conceive grew into weeks and months, and eventually they both sought medical assistance to make sure everything was fine. It wasn't. To Alice's dismay, she learned that she was incapable of conceiving as her eggs weren't maturing in her body prior to her monthly cycle. The end result was that she could carry a child, though it wouldn't have her genetic material. Martin was her rock during this time, there for her to cling to steady and support her, to provide some stability in her now chaotic world. He did his utmost to not only tell her but show her just how he felt about her, and that he was truly blessed that she was a part of his life. Between his love and support, as well as the services of a therapist, Alice slowly reclaimed her life and her bearings. However, now that pregnancy was out of the picture, Alice had swung to the opposite end of the spectrum and no longer wished to have a house full of children. Adoption was a taboo subject, as Martin soon discovered, as was IVF or other possible procedures. Instead, Alice announced her intention to return to charity work, but this time as a volunteer. "I can do so much more work this way," she explained. "Before, I could only manage one office, but now I can volunteer for a variety of programs that I feel drawn to." Martin truly wanted the best for her, and even though he was surprised that she chose to just announce her decision instead of discussing the possibility as they both usually did, he again put his complete support and encouragement behind her choice. The years went by, and sure, both Martin and Alice became accustomed to their circumstances and lifestyle. No longer newlyweds, they still found themselves enjoying the youthful explorations of each other 2 or 3 times each week, or at least they did until things at work had become so chaotic over the past 7 months. Between Martin's exhaustion and the sheer number of hours spent at the office, their lovemaking had dropped to twice a week, then once a week, and then to every other week. Don't be misled, Martin wasn't obsessed with his work. In fact, he noticed that he was as responsible for their dwindling love life as his job. As was his way, he sat down with Alice to discuss things with her. Alice, he remembered, hadn't said a negative word whatsoever, instead telling him that she understood the pressures he was under and that it was her time to be there for him. At the end of their discussion, he made his own private commitment to take more naps and to make sure that he'd be able to give his love the attention that she deserved. And for a few weeks, things seemed to improve. Lovemaking jumped to twice a week, then 3 times a week. True to his word, Martin tried to work smarter rather than harder and focused on resting throughout the day so that he could be there for his wife at night. But again, the downward spiral recommenced. 3 nights became 2, then 1, then again to every other week. When asked, Alice explained that she was doing this for him and that she was sure that once things were resolved at work, they'd more than make up for it all. They hadn't made love in almost a month, Martin now realized. He had become so focused on keeping things under control at work and on simply loving his wife at home that he hadn't even considered the last time they'd made love. Now it seemed he knew why she wasn't concerned. But Martin quickly realized he didn't actually know. He certainly had his suspicions, but he was not the type of man who would just allow a suspicion to be treated as a solid fact. Oddly enough, it was this realization that brought him back to the present. He'd have to talk with Alice, he knew. Perhaps there was a logical reason why these charges were appearing and on a card which he had been led to believe she had closed. Perhaps he was mistaken, that it was another account he was thinking of, and that these purchases were something she did for her charity work. Still, there was that subtle little voice in the back of his mind questioning those possibilities. It was now after 8:30 and still Alice hadn't returned. More than 4 hours had passed since he returned home, and over 2 had elapsed since he discovered the mysterious credit card statement. Martin was now sitting in his den with 2 fingers of Jack Daniels and a glass over ice, slowly sipping the burning amber liquid while he mentally ran through various ways to bring up the matter with his wife. Finally, at 8:15, the sound of the garage door opening made its way through the house. Sitting in the den, Martin watched as his wife hurried into the house, a nervous look on her face when she saw him in the den. Her nervous look was quickly replaced with a smile that seemed a bit out of place with her slightly disheveled appearance. There wasn't any one thing that glaringly stood out of place, but everything seemed just a little off. Her hair was slightly messy, but not a mess. Her clothes appeared well-worn, though not rumpled. But taken as a whole, it was disquieting nonetheless. "You're home early, honey," Alice said, still standing in the kitchen, virtually as far as she possibly could get yet still remain in his line of sight. "When did you get home?" Martin opened his mouth to answer, but for some reason the words did not come out as he had intended. "Oh, a little while ago." "Where were you, honey?" "Oh, I got a call around 5 letting me know there was an emergency meeting at 6, came her reply. So I quickly changed and headed out." Perhaps it was the bourbon which allowed him to keep his face neutral and friendly when the obvious lie hit him. Or perhaps it was a testament to the nature of the man that he could stick to his principles until he had proof one way or the other. Either way, Martin simply smiled and allowed her blatant lie to be treated as truth. Sure enough, Alice made her way out of the kitchen, avoiding the den entirely, and headed upstairs. As soon as he heard the shower running, his mind shifted gears, and he began heading down an entirely different path. Grabbing pen and paper, his list quickly took shape, and with it, a plan. The rest of the night was tense and relaxed at the same time. For Martin, it was tense in that he was now adamant that he not allow Alice to know that he had caught her lie, nor that she learned that her use of the allegedly canceled card was discovered as well. Alice, on the other hand, was blissfully ignorant of all this and continued with her nightly routine as if, as she believed, all was well. Pleading exhaustion, Martin headed up early to bed, and when Alice joined him later, he made sure his breathing was even and slow so that she would hopefully assume he was sleeping. His acting was good, and she nodded off shortly after crawling under the covers. The next day, Martin went into work early, caught up on the absolutely essential duties of his dual position, then told his secretary that he had a meeting out of the office and that he may not be back before the end of the day. Promising to have his cell phone with him and turned on, he left his office to start the truly important work for the day. First, he stopped in to see Tom Clark, the head of security for the company. While avoiding any particular details regarding his situation, he managed to give a general explanation about what his problem was and asked for him to recommend a private investigator. Bill, however, did one better and called ahead to schedule a rush appointment. With a name and an address in his pocket, Martin at last left the building. Mark Johnson was a perfectly ordinary man, Martin observed. None of his features were such as to stand out, and Martin could easily imagine that the man could virtually disappear in a small crowd. What wasn't ordinary, however, was the glowing review that Tom Clark had given him, in which Head praised this former police detective highly. "So why don't you describe the nature of your problem?" Alex began once the two men were seated. This time, Martin held nothing back, from his discovery of the credit card statement to the blatant lie he had been told when his wife found him home before her. It all came out. Alas, for Martin, so did the tears. He hadn't cried while this was all happening, but now that he was recounting it for someone else, it seemed he just couldn't stop. To his credit, Alex neither looked away nor looked embarrassed. Instead, he politely waited for the other man to regain his composure. At last, the tale and the tears came to an end, and Alex continued. "To make sure we're both in agreement," Alex's voice reassuringly said, "you wish for my firm to determine whether your wife is in fact carrying on an affair and to provide you with any and all information, however things turn out." "Exactly," came the reply. "At this point, all I have is a lie, some credit card charges that do not make sense, and a lot of questions. I need proof one way or the other so that I can properly decide what to do with my life." The next 10 minutes saw Martin writing a check for a rather hefty retainer, as well as signing several forms which would allow for recording devices to be placed within his house and in her car, as the title was in his name. After leaving, Martin made his way to an outdoor cafe, where under the green and white umbrella thrust through the outdoor table he sat at, he called his bank and his credit card companies, asking them to provide statement copies for the past 12 months and to have them shipped to his work address. That out of the way, he sat back and enjoyed the chai latte he had ordered when he sat down. All too soon, however, he found himself looking inward in a less than healthy fashion. Realizing that this couldn't be a good thing, he made his way back to work and spent the remainder of his day taking care of the rest of the work which hadn't been tackled earlier. The next week was uneventful other than that Martin was doing his utmost to act as if things were absolutely unchanged in their world. Somehow, he managed to be as much the old Martin that he could remember being, including the gentle touches and occasional kisses that had been part of their interaction together. Alice, thankfully, seemed not to notice anything that may have been missed from his earlier behavior, and so the days went by. 1 week became 2, and things were unchanged. Alice and Martin still were not intimate, and Alice seemed not to notice that they were now well over a month since their last lovemaking. When Martin at last got the call from Mark Johnson, he all but flew from his office, quickly making his way across town to meet with the investigator. The look on Alex's face, however, told Martin all he needed to know. "I'm sorry," was all that Alex said as he laid the folder in front of his client. "All the documentation is inside, but allow me to give you a brief explanation of what we found." Martin's mind was numb. It was all he could do to face the man across the desk from him and pay attention to his words. Mark Johnson continued, "As you suspected, your wife is meeting a man at the Royal Plaza Hotel downtown. She meets him twice weekly on Mondays and Thursdays, and at his house on Wednesdays. Photos and a DVD containing video footage we were able to obtain have been included in your package, as has a transcript of those sessions and calls recorded at your house and in the car. There is an additional copy for your attorney as well. Again, I'm truly sorry that your suspicions were correct." With that, Martin left the investigator's office, making his way back to his own. Once again sitting behind his desk, he picked up the phone and called his boss, David. "I need to pop in and see you," Martin said. "Got time?" It took 3 minutes to make his way to David's office, and another 10 seconds after David saw the look on his face to switch from pleased boss to concerned friend. Martin filled his friend in on his home situation, then completely surprised his boss. "I need the number for a good no, a great divorce attorney," Martin started, "and then I want to take that job in Amsterdam," he concluded. "Amsterdam?" David asked. "You're sure?" "David," replied Martin, "after all this is said and done, I'm going to need to get away to someplace where I'm not going to see Alice in every building or event. I figure another continent should do the trick nicely. Besides," he finished with a half-hearted chuckle, "now that I don't have a personal life to speak of, just think of how much work I'll be able to accomplish." The promotion was approved with a start date set for 2 weeks from that day. David also approved a 2-week vacation at the company's expense prior to that, so that Martin would have time to take care of any necessary business before heading to his new assignment. "Well, it looks like you don't get to call me boss anymore," David concluded as he walked Martin to the door. "Until your next promotion, that is," Martin answered with a grin. "I'll see you when I come back in 2 weeks to pack my things." Thanks again for that referral. Stopping at his office to collect the financial documents he had shipped to him at work, he quickly left for the day. At the appointed time, Martin entered the firm of Harris, Walker, and Scott. He gave the receptionist his name and sat down to wait for his meeting with the attorney David had called. Moments later, he was ushered into an office where he met his attorney, Sophia Davis. Rising from behind her desk to shake his hand, he noticed that she was tall, dark-haired, and very relaxed. In fact, her demeanor began to rub off on him, which helped as he began explaining his situation to her, from his first discovery to his hiring of the private investigator and the results of their surveillance. Far from being aloof and businesslike, she paid careful attention and asked questions along the way. Before Martin knew it, he was explaining all about the drop-off in his sex life, the realization that he was to blame, and his steps to correct it, as well as about the return of the love-making problems weeks later. At last, he was done. He was a completely spent and exhausted man just from confronting his demons. Karen reviewed her notes, then faced her client. "So, what are your goals?" she asked. "In this state, you have the option to file for irreconcilable differences, which will basically be a procedural matter. As long as both parties sign the divorce decree, then ITLL move through the court system and be approved anywhere from 45 to 90 days from the time it's filed. However, if you're to divorce for cause, such as for adultery, then you're looking at an actual court case, which will raise your costs significantly. Either way, since this is a no-fault state, the courts won't consider the reason for divorce when dividing the marital assets, unless specified otherwise in the decree. Things will be divided evenly between the two of you. This means that anything you didn't bring with you into the marriage, such as heirlooms, will be subject to division. Shall be entitled to half of all the financial assets, including your pension and retirement package, no matter how you file." "Wait a minute," countered Martin. "When we married, we both worked. She chose to go into volunteer work after we discovered we couldn't have children. It's not like she couldn't have gone back to work or anything. I don't think it's very fair that she might be able to take half of what will accrue in the future. There are options we can pursue for alternative compensation, but ITLL have to be something she agrees to in the end," Karen replied, discovering a dark, hard side to himself that he never previously suspected he possessed. Martin answered her, "Well, I think she'll be willing to trade that for the reason for our divorce being kept out of the public eye. Those charities she volunteers with are quite selective, after all. Otherwise, I could always just quit my job and have no pension whatsoever for her to collect on." The two discussed more particulars of the divorce, and then he wrote another sizable check for her retainer and left. Time passed slowly over the next week. Martin was taking care of the incidentals that were necessary for his upcoming move and had rented a hotel room at the local budget inn to act as his base of operations while he was on vacation. Under no circumstances did he want his soon-to-be ex-wife to know he wasn't at work. Perhaps it was cowardly to be avoiding the confrontation like this, but he had already decided that he wouldn't be dealing further with this until things were as resolved as he possibly could make them. At last, everything was in place. He had established a new checking and savings account with United Capital Bank, had changed the beneficiaries on his life insurance, pension, and investment fund plans, had arranged for a new cell phone that would work in Europe, and most importantly, had received the completed and filed divorce paperwork from Sophia Davis. Taking the time to complete a few additional legal matters at her office as well, it was a Thursday, he noted, as he made his way home, arriving just before 3 as he had all those weeks ago. Again, just after 8, she returned. This time, however, when she glanced into the den, he wasn't there. Continuing onward through the kitchen and into the entryway, she was about to climb the stairs when she heard his voice. "Alice, we need to talk." Stopping in mid-stride, she turned and put a rather forced smile on her surprised face. "Give me a second, honey. I'm all grubby and need to clean up." "No, Alice, we need to talk now," came his reply. "ITLL just be a few minutes." "Really?" she continued, trying to head up the stairs as he continued to stare at her. It was quite disturbing, him staring with no real expression on his face whatsoever. "This can't wait," Martin replied. "So come on in and sit down," he finished, gesturing at the couch. "Stop being ridiculous," Alice suddenly snapped, the look on her face a curious blend of desperation and outrage. "Whatever you have to talk about will still be there when I get back." With that, she quickly made her way up the stairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. As he once again heard the shower spring to life, Martin made his decision. Going into their office, he took out a piece of stationery and began writing. Alice, by the time you read this, we'll be starting anew. I wanted to have this discussion with you face-to-face, but you again decided that your wants and needs came before our needs as a couple, a family, a marriage. There is much I don't know about you. I now find out. I suppose I didn't think that was possible after 10 years of marriage, but I guess that's yet one more thing I can add to my list of things I don't or didn't know. So what is it I don't know about you? I don't know when you started having sex with Brian Evans. I don't know how often or how many times you had sex with him. I don't know how you could come back home and act like you did, as if all was right if a little strained because of my schedule between us. I don't know if you love him, nor do I know if you were planning on leaving me for him. What I do know, however, is equally substantial. I do know that the only time we discussed our marriage and lovemaking was when I brought it up. I do know that I have never, either overtly or tacitly, given my approval for our relationship to expand beyond the bounds of monogamy. I do know that you've used money I've earned to finance this sordid little affair, and most importantly, I know this as far as I'm concerned. It ends here and now. I know that I've made sure our joint accounts are frozen pending the outcome of the divorce negotiations. I know that a household maintenance account has been established to cover the utility bills until the divorce is finalized, and that all our joint credit cards have been canceled. Yes, all of them. I'm including $750 per month for food and incidentals until you can find another job, but the days of your free Redino pun intended are over. Below this letter is a copy of my petition for divorce. I kept it nice and generic, using irreconcilable differences as the grounds, because suing you for divorce due to your adultery would not be my first choice. You made my life happy for many years, or at least you did until I learned of your unfaithfulness. I would like to let this marriage die a dignified death rather than a sordid and ugly one. With that in mind, I strongly urge you to get a good lawyer and to review the documents carefully. I've tried to be fair, or at least as fair as the circumstances allow, but there are a few areas where I'm absolutely unwilling to compromise, and my lawyer knows exactly which ones they are. I won't wish you the best of luck, as that would be hypocritical of me. Instead, allow me to wish you this: that you find whatever it is you're truly looking for in life, and that you have the good sense when you do to be content with it. Your soon-to-be ex-husband, Martin. The shower was still running, he noted. Either he was remarkably fast in putting his thoughts to paper, or else Alice was trying to use her shower to prepare. Either way, it wasn't necessary. Gathering up her copy of the petition for divorce, he placed it, the letter, and his wedding ring on the living room chair he had been sitting in, went into the garage, climbed into his car, and left for the Budget Inn. It was rapidly approaching 9 when his cell phone rang, breaking him out of the ongoing replay of his failed marriage that was winding through his mind again and again. Glancing at the caller ID, he saw that it was Alice and let the call go to voicemail. 10 seconds later, however, the phone started ringing again. Waiting until it once again went to voicemail, he quickly turned off the ringer, then turned on the television, which he only marginally watched. For the next 3 days, Martin kept to himself, either at the hotel or else on his several brief shopping trips. Suits were cleaned and pressed, accessories and incidentals bought and packed away. Working quietly behind the scenes with David, he had arranged for the company to find and lease an apartment in Amsterdam for him and for a crew to come in and assemble the furniture he had purchased and had shipped to that location. David, to his credit, had done everything possible to keep the news of Martin's promotion and upcoming departure a closely guarded secret. Only David and Alice, Martin's secretary, knew of his big move, and Alice was positively furious when she'd seen what this had done to her boss. But Martin still had that last week of work left to go. So bright and early Monday morning, he made his way back to work, strolled past the security desk, through the electronic doors, and down the hallways to his office. Alice was both glad to see him and sad as well. Her boss, the one everybody loved to work with, was leaving, and it was hard on her. David, too, was sad to see his friend going, though he was holding up far better than Alice was. The two met a few hours into Martin's first day back, and then took the meeting off-site to continue over lunch. After bringing David up to speed on how things worked out, Martin offered his own opinion. "That lawyer you recommended is incredible," he said. guiding a forkful of steak to his mouth. "Really?" replied David, a guarded look on his face. "Why do you say that?" "Well, she truly seems to get it," said Martin. "From the very beginning, I felt that I'm not just a nameless or faceless client, that she's listening to my wants and needs and is taking them into account. Thanks for recommending her." To his surprise, David started to chuckle, then to laugh. "You had me worried for a minute there," David told him. "That's not just a great attorney you've got there, that's my daughter." At that moment, a stray feather could have knocked Martin flat on his bum. David had a daughter who was an attorney? Seeing the look of consternation on his friend's face, David took pity and explained further. "My wife and I had Karen shortly after we were married," he said. "By the time she entered law school, she was engaged. Her mother and I didn't really approve of the whole thing, but realized that it was her life to live, not ours. Well, about 6 years after they finally tied the knot, she caught her ex-husband in bed with one of their neighbors. She was devastated, and once it was all over, she decided to specialize in representing the victims of adultery and divorce cases. Well, she's a phenomenal lady, that's for sure," said Martin, quickly gulping down some water to help get back to normal. The shock of this discovery was beginning to pass now, and he was paying more attention to his friend across the table. "She thinks you're a pretty remarkable guy yourself," David shot right back. "She can't tell me any of the particulars, mind you, but has gone so far as to say that you've been far more fair-minded and generous than most she's seen come through her doors. I think you've got a new fan," he concluded. The lunch wound down, and the two made their way back to the office. However, as they were walking through the front doors, Martin suddenly found himself face-to-face with a very agitated Alice. "You walk out," she yelled. "You won't answer my calls, and you've closed the accounts and the credit cards. How am I supposed to live?" "Alice, now is neither the time nor the place for our discussion," he began. Seeing her start to react, he held up his hand. "I will see you tonight at 8:30 at your house. We can talk then." "We will talk now," exploded Alice. "No, we won't," he answered. "If you persist in making a scene, I will have security remove you from here and, if necessary, have the police summoned to escort you from the premises. I will see you at 7, he finished, turning to make his way through the security doors and back to his office. As shocked as she was, Martin went back to David's office and let him know he was leaving for the day. David, having seen how things with Alice had begun, had already called Sophia Davis and arranged for Martin to meet her as quickly as he could get there. "We need a plan," said Karen as soon as he had seated himself in her office. "With what I've been told about her behavior at your office, we need to make sure that everything has been done and done properly." "What do you mean?" asked Martin. "You had intended to serve the divorce papers personally," she began, "but there is absolutely no proof that she received it, on top of which there is no way to know just how she's going to behave when you meet later tonight. So, what do you suggest? Let's arrange for her to be properly served by a sheriff's deputy tonight, say around 8, Karen replied. "If I hurry, I can arrange for the papers to be served by then. I only have to make it through the week," Martin observed, "and then am heading for Europe." "Then I strongly urge you to make sure you take any and all necessary precautions to make sure you're not caught unprepared," came her answer. The next few hours found the two of them drawing up yet more documents, with Martin signing a limited power of attorney notice which would permit her to act on his behalf in the matter of the divorce. Martin also made 2 tapes, the first being a videotape deposition where he went through everything that had led to this point, from finding the unexpected bank statement to hiring a private investigator, and lastly engaging an attorney and seeking divorce. The second tape, however, was much shorter. Once they had wrapped up any loose ends that either of them could think of, Martin suggested that the two go for an early dinner. To his surprise and delight, she quickly agreed, and they headed for a local bistro known for its tasty meals and generous portions. As they ate, they also discussed possible problems and how to deal with them, and by the time Martin left to meet at his former home, he felt much more confident about his position. Martin realized that things were going to be every bit as difficult as he had feared from the moment he rang the doorbell at 8:30. His first attempt to ring the bell left him still standing on the front stoop, and a second attempt had no better luck. After a third unsuccessful try, he had turned to walk back to his car, only to have the front door finally open when he was midway down the sidewalk. "You could have just come in, you know," Alice's voice carried down the walk. "It's your house too." After all, not anymore, he replied, every bit as loudly, letting his words carry forth where perhaps the neighbors could hear. Assuming the petition goes through as I submitted it, the house is yours. As he once again reached the stoop, Alice stepped back from the open doorway and gestured for him to come inside. Turning away from the still open door and walking toward the living room, closing the door behind him, Martin followed shortly thereafter, noticing as he did so that the large manila envelope containing the divorce papers was still sitting on the chair he had left it upon. With that in mind, he quickly chose the other armchair, as he had no intention whatsoever of sharing the couch with her. You wanted to talk, Alice, he said as the silence between the two deepened. So I suggest you start talking. Evidently, that was all the incentive she needed as she launched her verbal attack. You need to stop this nonsense immediately, she snapped at him. This is not how a marriage is. Was this what you wanted me to talk to you for? He quickly countered. Was our meeting to simply be a vehicle for you to make absurd demands and state the obvious? Alice was stunned. This was not how she had anticipated their conversation would go. By this point, she had been living for so long with her own preconceived notion of what was appropriate that it had never entered her mind that she couldn't have both her husband and her lover, and that all she needed to do was put her foot down for everyone to fall into line. Martin, however, wasn't behaving as she wanted, as she expected. And you're right that this is not how a marriage is, he continued, deepening her shock. This is how a divorce is. Well, I don't want a divorce, came her petulant reply. Martin was well and truly stunned, to say the least. Where was the woman he had known all those years ago? The one who had a solid head on her shoulders that was used for more than just spouting nonsense. Whether you want one or not is pretty much irrelevant by this point, Martin observed aloud, eliciting a glare from Alice. Darling, she tried, appearing to soften a bit. You have to realize that in our circles, it's all about appearances. A divorce just won't do. Suddenly, it was all clear to him where things had gone wrong, why she was behaving the way she was, and saddest of all, why there was absolutely no chance for them any longer. As Alice sat there with a self-assured and smug look upon her face, he put all the pieces together and, glancing at his watch, made his decision. Well, let me explain a few things to you, came his quickly but carefully considered reply. First, while you volunteer with the local social set, neither you nor I are part of that circle. Whether or not the other social darlings you interact with opt to live other than monogamous lifestyles is something between themselves and their spouses. However, I have no intent to stay with a lying, cheating wife just because it's more convenient for you. Slowly, the smug look on Alice's face was being replaced by one of shock and horror. Feeling as if his words were getting through, Martin pressed on. Deciding to do volunteer work full-time did not come with a condition that I assist you in maintaining an image or appearance. And I only recall one promise that the two of us had to live up to. We made it a little over 10 years ago, and it was one we made before our families, our friends, and our Creator. From shock and horror, the look on Alice's face quickly morphed into one of predatory victory. Perhaps he wasn't getting through to her, Martin thought. He decided to wait and see what she had to say next, and found himself quite glad he did. Our wedding vows, you mean, countered Alice. The ones where you promised to love, honor, and cherish me, in sickness and in health, for better or worse, as long as we both shall live. Martin simply nodded deeply once. Well, dear husband, she continued, her voice now dripping with venom, it certainly seems to me that you are the one breaking those vows, as I'm still here and for better or worse, while you're the one gone. An interesting interpretation, Martin quickly replied, catching Alice completely by surprise. She was certain that her line of reasoning would be more than sufficient to make him see the error of his ways. However, there is a problem with your recollection, it seems. Now she was puzzled. She was certain that using his own argument, she had a firm position from which to direct the course of this discussion. There could be no other way things could go, she was sure. You see, our vows promised one other important thing, Martin continued, deepening her confusion. Not only did we both promise to love, honor, and cherish the other through sickness and health until parted by death, but we also promised to forsake all others. Having a lover is not forsaking all others, Alice. Martin relaxed in his chair, seeming to wait for her reply. After a few moments, she began to speak. "I never meant for you to find out," she started, fully expecting him to stop her right then and there. "At first, I was so frustrated with all the long hours you were working, and one day at a meeting, I confided in a few of the others there. When they suggested I take a lover, I was shocked. But as the weeks went by, they kept explaining to me how having someone on the side allowed them to still give their husbands a solid home life while allowing for their needs to be taken care of as well." "Well, that's interesting, Alice," replied Martin, "but whatever gave you the idea that our situations were in any way similar to theirs?" "You were working all those hours and were always so tired when you got home," she answered. His reply was again lightning quick. "Yes, I was. But you'll also recall that I was the one who brought up the subject, and that the two of us discussed it and came up with ways to make this less stressful for the both of us. At no point in that conversation did I hear you asking about taking a lover, nor did I ever imply that doing so might be a solution I would find acceptable." Once again glancing at his watch, he quickly stood and made his way to the door. Confused, Alice rose behind him and followed. As he reached the entryway, there was a loud knock, and when Martin opened the door, Alice could see the brown-clad shape of a sheriff's deputy in her doorway. "It's for you," Martin said, stepping to the other side of the officer of the law. "Alice Carter?" the man asked. "Yes, you've been served," came the deputy's reply as he placed a packet of documents into her hands. "Deputy," came a female voice Alice had never heard before. "Could you please take a good look at this woman and verify that she is in no way harmed?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied and gave her a good long look. As Alice looked on, the deputy and Sophia Davis escorted Martin back to his vehicle and watched him drive away before the attorney climbed into her own car and left in the opposite direction. The deputy was the last to depart, waiting until Alice had closed the front door before he started his engine and pulled away from the curb. Martin's cell phone rang as he was driving, and when he looked at the caller ID and saw it was David calling, he quickly picked up the call. "How did it go?" he asked. "Well, I know where she got that harebrained idea in her head from," Martin answered. "It's from those society biddies she volunteers with. Our marriage is well and truly dead, and now we only need the last rites of a divorce decree to complete the job." "Well, I've got another surprise for you if you want to take advantage of it," David tentatively offered. "Care to head to Europe a couple of days early?" "I'd love to," came the reply. "Then stop in here tomorrow morning and pick up the revised itinerary and tickets. Your apartment is ready for you, and the building manager will be alerted to your early arrival," David was now gleefully informing his friend. For his part, Martin slept like a baby during the flight across the Atlantic Ocean. Alice was slow to react, even after their meeting, and it was more than 2 weeks later that she finally contacted an attorney. Even then, she still was clinging to her fantasy that Martin would realize that this was best for both of them and come back. When her attorney found out who was representing Martin, the discussion he had with her did not leave Alice feeling very hopeful, yet she stuck to her guns. There would be no divorce. She would refuse to sign any papers. 2 weeks after hiring her attorney, and almost 5 weeks after Martin had left the country, Alice found herself seated with her attorney in a conference room at Sophia Davis' offices. A few minutes after they had been seated, Karen entered, and Alice quickly recognized her as the tall, elegant woman from the night she was served by the deputy. "Where's my husband?" snapped Alice. "Your husband is not here," came the measured reply. Alice still did not know that Martin had left the country, and Karen was under strict orders that she should not be told unless it came out in court. "I have been, however, empowered to act on his behalf in these matters, and have been given very specific instructions as to how I am to proceed in his divorce from you, Mrs. Carter." Alice wasn't buying it. Her own preconceived notions wouldn't let her entertain the idea that he had written her off for good. "I don't believe you. I want to hear it from him," came her petulant reply. "Very well," Martin's attorney agreed with surprising equanimity as she lifted a remote control and pointed it at the television on the wall behind her. Shortly, Martin's face appeared on the screen, and he began to speak, seemingly directly to Alice. "Good day, everyone. Today is October 15th, 2023, and I am Jacob Roberts. It is 4:47 in the afternoon, and as my job will have me out of the area for the immediate future, and because I have absolutely no desire whatsoever to see my soon-to-be ex-wife, I am making this tape to provide concrete and, I hope, incontestable instructions for my attorney of record, Sophia Davis, to follow with regard to my divorce from Alice Carter, née Miller. It is my full intention to pursue a divorce based upon the grounds of irreconcilable differences, as I cannot manage to reconcile myself to my wife's decision to take a lover or lovers. To that end, I have crafted a divorce petition which provides for an equitable division of our marital assets, with the exceptions being that I keep my investment fund and retirement accounts in their entirety, and in exchange, Alice will receive sole ownership of our home. As it is paid for, the equity alone will more than compensate her for any money she may feel entitled to from those parts of my estate I wish to keep for myself. I have already made arrangements for the title to her vehicle to be placed in her name, and for the deed to the house to be amended as such once my petition is agreed to. In the interim, I have made additional arrangements for a household maintenance account to be established and for any and all utility bills to be paid from said account. I am also providing a stipend of $750 per month to be used for food and incidentals at my soon-to-be ex-wife's discretion. However, if she wishes to continue buying lingerie and other items for her dates, then she will need to find employment, as I will not increase my stipend to allow for her continuing along the path which led to the end of our relationship. As far as the subject of alimony is concerned, I am willing to offer alimony commensurate with what her projected income would be had she not left her previous employment and had instead been receiving yearly merit-based pay increases. I feel this is incredibly generous, as it was her decision and her decision solely that she not return to work after she had left. Her volunteer work was a choice she and she alone made, and I am not willing to move beyond my offer in this regard. Lastly, much like our wedding vows, this is an all-or-nothing issue. That means you either accept my terms, all of them, Alice, or else my attorney will follow my secondary set of instructions. They are quite simple. If, for whatever reason, this agreement cannot be reached, then the grounds for my divorce will change to adultery, and I will name your lover, Brian Evans, in my suit, as well as in an alienation of affection suit seeking monetary damages for his part in the destruction of my marriage. I will make sure that this is a very public matter, that the information I have collected detailing your tryst with your lover is brought to the public eye, and that, if possible, your society and charity friends are as uncomfortably reminded of this matter as possible. The choice is yours, Alice. You can have a moderately comfortable existence without me, or you can have a very uncomfortable existence without me. But as you may have noticed, there is no option which allows for you to have any existence with me. With that, the screen went dark just like Alice's future. Alice and Martin were divorced 6 months later. Throughout the proceedings, Alice still held on to the belief that her marriage could be salvaged. She did not fight the divorce but tried her best to contact Martin. The only problem, he was out of her reach, and she was out of his heart. Thanks for watching. If you found out your partner was cheating, would you forgive them or walk away? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories.